Love, loyalty and duty. King Charles thanks his mother for her unwavering service and makes a solemn vow in his first address as monarch.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you.
As the throne passes from mother to son, Charles III will be formally proclaimed king at an historic ceremony at St James's Palace this morning.
At Buckingham Palace, tributes continue to pour in for the Queen as people reflect on her reign.
She just had that wonderful ability to be personable to people.
Precious.
Very, very special. Yeah.
Privilege to come. Privilege to come.
It's Saturday, the 10th of September. We're looking ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
That will happen at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace in London. For the first time in history, the announcement by the Accession Council will be televised.
We'll bring you more reflections from those who knew Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who died on Thursday afternoon, and bring you the latest tributes from across the UK and the Commonwealth.
First, our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph reports on King Charles' first full day as monarch and the emotional tribute to the Queen.
His first public appearance as king. Before official duty, he met the people at Buckingham Palace. The cameras stayed close. There was an informality, even a kiss from a well-wisher, amidst the condolences and chat. Then a poignant image. King Charles III and Camilla Queen Consort walked into the palace from where his mother had reigned for 7 decades, and from where he will now serve, all ahead of the King's first address to the nation.
Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. My life will of course change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others.
He thanked his wife and both his sons, making William and Catherine Prince and Princess of Wales.
With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas.
He ended with a moving, personal tribute.
And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
A service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral saw senior politicians and members of the public reflect on a long reign. It ended with the national anthem. Now they sang God Save the King. And in a special BBC tribute programme last night, the Queen's children spoke personally about their mother.
It was a very special relationship, and apart from my three brothers, we're the only people who have that relationship. So that's how I remember her.
Today at St James's Palace, the new king will be officially proclaimed when the ceremonial body, the Accession Council, meets, a moment that will be televised for the first time. We're now in a period of time where the country is both mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, alongside welcoming the reign of King Charles III. It is a mix of emotion and formality, an adjustment for everyone. Over the weekend, we will get more details about plans for the coming days, including the date of the state funeral, when the royal family will lead the country's farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Anita McVeigh is outside Balmoral Castle, where Her Majesty died on Thursday. Good morning to you, Anita. Of course, we've seen many of those public events in London, but inside the castle, where you are this morning, the family continue to grieve privately.
Morning, Charlie and Naga. Morning, everyone. Yes, as far as we understand, members of the royal family are indeed still here at Balmoral Castle. We don't know all of the comings and goings exactly, but members of the family remain here with the Queen, and we know that, or we think that, we speculate that members of the family will or may come out later today to look at some of these wonderful bouquets and wonderful messages that have been left. Certainly they've grown in number since we were here yesterday morning. No surprise, because we saw a steady stream of people arriving here at Balmoral throughout the day to leave those floral tributes. A little later in the afternoon yesterday, I went to Ballater, which is the nearest town to Balmoral. We saw people queuing there for the coaches, which have been laid on specifically to bring people here to pay their respects. And opposite that coach stop is the Church of Glenmick in the centre of the town, where there are books of condolence. Beside that, a grassy area where a photo of the late Queen has been placed as another focal point for floral tributes. But here at the castle, yes, members of the royal family still with the Queen's body before, as her son, the now King Charles, said she makes her last great journey. We are waiting on details of how exactly that journey will unfold in the coming days. But for the moment, a sense of quiet here. I'm sure it will get busier again today, because those coaches that I mentioned, they have been laid on again today from early in the morning to late in the evening to bring people here. For the moment, it's very quiet, it's peaceful. The mists are hovering over the River Dee, which I can just hear in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but a sense of calm, a sense of peace, but obviously a sense of sadness as well in this place which the Queen loved so much, and the people in this local area know it meant so much to her, and she meant so much to them. Her body is in the ballroom at Balmoral Castle. It's where the people who worked for her, many of them for a very long time, are saying their final goodbyes to her. We know, understandably, that they are very upset. That's what we've heard from inside the castle. And they are saying their final goodbyes before the Queen's body will eventually be taken from here onto Edinburgh and then eventually back to London. But those precise details, the details of that ceremony, that's what we're waiting to hear. We don't know if we'll get that information later today. Perhaps we will. But for the moment, Balmoral is very much the focal point for people in this area who want to pay their respects. Back to you, Charlie and Naga.
Anita, thank you.
Now, at Buckingham Palace, King Charles received a warm reception from crowds yesterday, and Joanna Gosling is there for us this morning. Joanna, good morning to you. Of course, now more people from outside of London will be taking the opportunity to pay their respects today.
Yes, Naga, and actually all through the night people have been here. I was told by some of those who've been on duty here overnight that there was a large crowd here until 3 in the morning, and throughout the night after that there was a steady stream of people visiting. And I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but there is a small group of people, but probably 100 or so, maybe a little bit more than that, but at the gates. And also, I'm not sure if you can just see over my shoulder those orange lights. That's the crews that have been working through the night to move the floral tributes that are being laid here in their thousands, hundreds of thousands. The people who were working here overnight have told me they're moving the floral tributes every day through to Green Park, which is just next to us here, where they have set up a floral garden, because they clearly anticipate, obviously, that there are going to be so many, hundreds of thousands so far. Not just flowers, candles are lit outside the palace. There are teddies of Paddington Bear, of course, remembering that iconic recording that the Queen made with Paddington Bear inside the palace here behind me for the Platinum Jubilee just a few months ago. And yesterday, King Charles III had his first direct encounter with members of the public when he arrived here and got out of his car with the Queen Consort Camilla and took some time to greet members of the crowd. They kissed his hand, one kissed his cheek, and there were shouts of "God save the King." Then he went in there, obviously, to record that statement for the nation, which we saw last night. He's got a busy day here again today, but let's just take a look now at what happened with all of those coming here as a focal point to pay tribute, with Graham Satchell.
Look at the streets around Buckingham Palace, heaving with people, many carrying bunches of flowers and handwritten tributes. The queues stretching as far as the eye can see.
It's incredibly emotional, actually. It's like a feeling in your stomach as you're walking around. It means so much to people. Something about being here as well just evokes, so much emotion.
I think she's been absolutely fantastic, really selfless and devoted. So I just felt I really wanted to come and just be part of this, to be like a thank you to her for everything that she's done in those 70 years for this country.
She just had that wonderful ability to be personable to people.
Precious.
Very, very special. Yeah.
Privileged to come. Privileged to come. I'm very sorry.
St Paul's Cathedral and a service of remembrance for Her Majesty the Queen. St Paul's was open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis, so there were more queues, almost 2,000 people waiting in line to pay tribute.
The Queen has been an incredible leader and has endured so much, and what she took on from such a young age, so soon after losing her father, is so inspiring. No matter what your views are on any of this, I think that you can, as a human, be inspired by that and respect that.
What did the Queen mean to you? Constant stability in the country, just that one constant. Like Boris said, she was timeless. And she's the mother of the country.
For a brief moment, the heavens opened. It couldn't have been more British, a queue for the Queen in the rain. For some here, the last 2 days, a reminder of 1965 and the funeral of Winston Churchill.
It's one of my earliest memories, really, standing on the balcony of somebody's office and watching the mile-long cortege go by. So,
feel like we've sort of come full circle?
It kind of feels a bit that way, I think probably the Queen is the most loved Brit since Churchill, and that's why we're all here.
At all the various places in and around London where people have gathered to remember the Queen, the feeling is the same. It is quiet, serious, dignified, and the sentiments expressed are the same. It's a mix of heartfelt respect and a profound sense of loss.
They're so beautiful.
Windsor Castle, the place the Queen called home, and again more flowers and quiet contemplation.
If there's been one constant in our lives in Britain, it's been the Queen, and I think it's just her sense of duty was obviously the thing that drove her, so I think she's just an amazing role model for both, younger and older generations.
It feels strange because so many people here, it's quite quiet, it's very quiet, and it's just sort of it's lovely to see sort of everybody coming together to show their respects, really. I was thinking about it yesterday, she was probably everybody's second mum. She was just there for everybody, really. She's such a nice person.
Back at Buckingham Palace, the new monarch, King Charles, and the start of a transition, not just in the transfer of constitutional power, but also in mood, smiles and handshakes.
He was very thankful for people coming out, and he just seemed very pleased to be here, and he appreciated people being here.
We are at the end of an era, and as one chapter of history closes, another is opening. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
The Royal Standard remains here at Buckingham Palace at full mast, although we do understand that King Charles III did not spend the night here. He and the Queen Consort, it was understood, had always planned to spend the night at Clarence House just up the road. But of course, this is the seat of the monarchy in London, and it's where we expect the King to return a little bit later today after that first duty of the day, the Accession Council, at which an oath will be sworn, and then afterwards he will be proclaimed king. But then after that we expect him to come back here to Buckingham Palace, where he will meet with Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, again. He met with her yesterday here, and we expect him to meet her again here today, along with members of the Cabinet and also the Archbishop of Canterbury. And whether or not he will stop to greet the crowd as he did yesterday, we don't know at this stage. But there are many, many floral tributes. There are so many people coming here who want to pay their respects, show their thanks and gratitude for the life and service of his mother, the Queen, and also to welcome him as the new monarch. So people will be coming here all day, and we will of course be here with them. Back to you in the studio.
Joanna, thanks very much. Joanna Gosling there for us.
MPs and peers will gather in Parliament today for a rare Saturday session to continue paying tribute to the Queen. Let's go to our political correspondent, Ione Wells, who can tell us more. Very good morning to you, Ione. It was an important day yesterday in the Commons. Many MPs taking the chance to pay their tributes, alongside, of course, that meeting between the new Prime Minister and King Charles.
That's right. Business as usual here in Westminster is somewhat on pause until the 21st of September. But again today, both Houses of Parliament from 1 o'clock will have the chance to pay tribute to the late Majesty the Queen as well. Now, from about 1 p.m, those tributes will begin. But first, some senior MPs will pledge an oath of allegiance to His Majesty the King, which other MPs will have the opportunity to do at a later date. And then those tributes will continue until about 10 p.m. this evening. And I think we can expect, as we heard yesterday, more personal memories being shared from some politicians about their experiences with the Queen, but also many MPs repeating this sentiment that came up a lot yesterday, with many describing her as the country's constant over the years that they have served in Parliament as well. Now, before that, though, there is going to be this formal ceremony at St James's Palace, just down the road from where we are today, which will formally proclaim King Charles III as king. This is what's known as the Accession Council, made up of senior politicians, members of the judiciary and archbishops, who will formally proclaim him king. And he will also make his own personal declaration and oath at that ceremony. And then later today we will expect, as we heard there from Joanna, this audience between the Prime Minister and her cabinet and the King as well. And this comes after Liz Truss's first audience with the King yesterday, where he turned to her and said that he's got to try and keep things going. And it was a really symbolic moment for the governance and the constitution of the UK, with a new monarch, a new Prime Minister, all in the space of a week. It is a week which, as the historian Sir Anthony Selden has described it, began with Boris Johnson presiding over Her Majesty's government. It's a week that ends here in Westminster with Liz Truss presiding over His Majesty's government.
Ione, thank you very much.
It's 19 minutes past 6. Let's take a look at some of the morning's papers. God Save the King. That is the headline on the front of the Times, alongside an image of King Charles III outside Buckingham Palace.
Let's see from the Daily Mirror, the headline there: loyalty, respect, love. These are the new King's key pledges, says the paper, to the nation. That, of course, from his speech to the nation last night. The paper featuring there a photograph of the monarch alongside a portrait of his late mother.
Now, the Telegraph's front page details King Charles's first acts as monarch, including his formal proclamation later today. You were hearing earlier from Ione about how that may play out. The paper also reflects on his first address, calling it one of the most remarkable King's speeches.
And The Guardian carries that same image. It's in all the papers this morning. Deep in thought of the King, whilst looking at some of the tributes outside the palace yesterday when he went to meet people in a short walkabout. The paper highlights his pledge to serve with loyalty and love.
Unsurprisingly, there's not much football happening today because most matches across the UK have been cancelled as a mark of respect to the Queen.
Rugby union, Test cricket and the Golf PGA Championships are all taking place today, however, while some horse racing returns tomorrow.
Now, players and officials from a wide range of sports have been paying tribute to Her Majesty, as Joe Wilson reports.
Today, some sport will pause. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, football has decided to stop. Horse racing, the Queen's great passion, will also be postponed in Britain. Other sports continue with expressions of regret and respect. This was the scene during practice at the Italian Grand Prix. We'll see similar at the cricket test match at the Oval. And sport will remember.
Her Majesty the Queen.
The Queen was there to acknowledge and elevate some of the proudest moments in sport. Bobby Moore at Wembley in 1966, Virginia Wade at Wimbledon in 1977. The Queen was a constant as the winners changed. Here, Ian Evans receives the Five Nations Rugby Union Trophy for Wales. Uniquely, the Queen officially opened 2 Olympic Games, 1976 in Montreal, where her daughter Princess Anne competed for Great Britain in the equestrian team, and London 2012.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Her James Bond-themed skydiving arrival was a triumph of choreography and humour, as well as dignity. So close with the Queen's sporting associations, it's no surprise that her death has prompted so many sporting reactions.
I feel like I have to go down to the funeral because I feel like we owe it to her. We are so lucky that the pair of us have been knighted, and just to have that honour feels so incredibly special. And for me now it does, I feel like now we have to give back to her, and I feel like we need to go and say our goodbyes.
On social media, Sir Mo Farah described meeting the Queen as one of the great honours of his life, while David Beckham wrote that until her last days she served her country with dignity and grace.
A royal win in the Gold Cup!
And we remember how sport, specifically horse racing, brought the Queen joy. When her horse won the Gold Cup at Ascot, it was a moment of celebration which we could all connect with. Racing now halts until Sunday.
I've been told by people close to her that the Racing Post would be the first thing that she would read in the morning at breakfast, and that she would be regularly in touch with her trainers and her bloodstock agents, and going to the Royal Stud at Sandringham was one of the great pleasures in life. So we were so lucky as a sport to have her as a supporter, and to have her knowledge as well.
Sporting life is public life. It can unite and inspire people like little else. Through the decades of her reign, the Queen understood this. She was at the heart of it. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Saturday morning, let's have a look at the weather. Stav's got the details. Let's see, the time now is 6:26. You're watching BBC Breakfast. Today we'll be looking ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
He's meeting the Accession Council at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace. That event will be televised for the first time. And then a public announcement will be made in the City of London. Similar declarations will follow in Belfast, Cardiff and Edinburgh tomorrow.
We'll, of course, have more reflections on the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose body remains in Balmoral today, as floral tributes are laid outside the gates of that castle, and, of course, at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, Sandringham as well, and indeed at many other places all across the UK and the Commonwealth.
Now, King Charles made his first formal address as a monarch yesterday. He praised his mother's warmth, humour and sense of duty.
He said her 96 years amounted to a life well lived and promised to follow her example.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavour to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others. This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my Queen Consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. In a little over a week's time, we will come together as a nation, as a Commonwealth, and indeed a global community, to lay my beloved mother to rest. In our sorrow, let us remember and draw strength from the light of her example. On behalf of all my family, I can only offer the most sincere and heartfelt thanks for your condolences and support. They mean more to me than I can ever possibly express. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
So that was part of King Charles's address to the nation that took place last night. Many people will have watched it. It was a combination of real emotion, tributes, and mentions of love, his family, the things that are important to him, and looking ahead to the future. And today is very much about that, as more of the procedures around the next few days emerge.
Today, Charles III will be formally proclaimed king. in a televised ceremony at St James's Palace this morning. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale is there. And James, good morning to you. I mean, so many things that are different. For one, this is something that most of us in the country will have no idea about what it looks like, but we're getting to see it because it's being televised as well.
Yeah, that's right, Naga. This is the extraordinary moment that we've never seen before. Essentially, this is the moment when, we know the King is already king. That happened when the Queen died. This is the moment when all the constitutional niceties and procedures about that moment are sorted out. So what's going to happen is they'll be meeting here at St James's Palace at about 10 o'clock. 200 of the most senior ministers, 14 diplomats from the realms, holders of the great offices of state. They will have a meeting, discuss various details, oaths and proclamations. Then a bit later, the King will join them. That will become a formal meeting of the Privy Council, his first official meeting in his new role. He will make various oaths, a declaration about the death of his mother. He'll also agree various orders in councils to allow for the continuity of government. And then once that's happened, the text of the proclamation that's been agreed will be read on that balcony out there. So essentially this was a moment in times past, before we had things like social media, when the people would be formally told, A, that the previous monarch had died, and B, this is who is going to be the new sovereign. So there'll be this declaration here, there'll be other declarations in the City of London in the coming 24 hours around the nations to formally tell the people, look, this is what's happened, and King Charles is your new king.
James, thanks very much. James Landale there for us ahead of that proclamation at 10 o'clock.
So, gun salutes, the tolling of church bells, a united House of Commons and an emotional address from the new king. Yesterday was, of course, an historic day.
Now, Jane McCubbin has been to York to see how people there have been reacting.
In York, everything looked the same.
It's not been a normal day today.
But everything felt different.
I just think she has been stable in an unstable world, and it gets more unstable by the week.
Yeah, I was saying with my friend at lunch, it just feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't think it's sunk in yet, to be quite honest with you.
No, I don't think it has.
It's just been a bit surreal, really. She's somebody that's been there my entire life. And it just seems very odd that she isn't anymore, I suppose.
Bells rang out, not just here in York, but also in Dartmouth, in Norwich, in Bolton.
And the bells have been ringing a lot during the day, all over the city. And everybody's upset. Just burst into tears, really. So we're crying in our wine. But it really, really upsetting, really. We were really tearful.
You have had to cry?
Yeah, I don't mind. And I will have more cries until it's all over.
Almost 3,000 people came to York Minster to give thanks yesterday.
That's right, yes, just to express the sympathy and the feelings of how beautiful and what a lovely person the Queen was and what she meant to us.
There will be a day when Isabella probably asks you about the Queen.
Yeah, probably learns about her in school.
Yeah. What will you tell her?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, I think just that she's been a big part of everybody's life.
Except the nation's grandmother.
Yeah, I think so.
There is grief, but gratitude too.
I think she was a pretty special person. I really do. So sad she's gone. And 2 days ago, she was still working and sworn a new Prime Minister. I mean, really?
You just think she was an awesome woman.
Oh, she was. She was fabulous.
There were gun salutes here in York. Also in Belfast. In Edinburgh. In Cardiff. And in London. And as the day started to close across the country, people gathered to hear their new king address the nation.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
I feel positive, but it feels really strange to say the king, God save the king, and it just feels weird. All my life I've said God save the Queen and not even thought about it.
The fact that everybody's welcomed Charles today, shaking his hands and talking to him.
For the more than 70 years in which my mother...
But actually the mama and papa bit at the end was very like, and it does make you think he's just lost his mum yesterday.
Yeah, the new king, so big boots to fill, but yeah.
This was a broadcast which marks the end of an era, a new chapter in the life of the monarchy and in the hearts of the nation.
Now, the impact of the Queen's death has been felt not just here in the UK, but around the world, both inside and outside the Commonwealth.
In a moment, we'll get the latest from Delhi. First, let's go to our Australia correspondent, Shama Khalil, who's in Sydney. Shama, very good morning to you. We've seen some of the tributes and the way people have responded there. Tell us a little more.
Well, you can only feel the respect, the reverence and the loss from the people's comments because they're very personal. I'm just going to read you a couple of them to give you a feel. One person said to us, she's always been a monarch, but to us, she's always felt like a mom. And we feel like she was someone that we can relate to. Someone else told us that she's felt like this anchor in our lives. And we feel like we've lost a member of our family. And another woman told the BBC, I always felt that she reminded me of my grandmother, strong, enduring, but always in an amazing and beautiful dress, leading with grace and style. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has described the Queen's commitment to service as inspiring. And he said, we lost an encouraging guide. He said that Australia always had a special place in the Queen's heart. She's visited here 16 times. The first, of course, was this historic visit in 1954 when she set foot on the harbour, on the Sydney harbour here. And it was the biggest event in Australia's history. No other event was as big as that. 3/4 of the population came out to see her, and Her Majesty would visit another 15 times. Today, there was a wreath-laying ceremony in the Queen's Terrace in Parliament House that was led by the Governor-General, the Queen's representative, the Prime Minister, and many dignitaries and diplomats. And you could feel the somber mood in Parliament House today. It's a place normally of a hive of activity, but as these wreaths were being laid in silence, you could feel the sadness, not just among the politicians and the diplomats, but also among the Australian people. Flags are flying half-mast in Parliament House, but here behind me as well, the Australian and the Aboriginal flags are flying at half-mast on the Sydney Bridge as tributes continue to come in.
Shama, there are though other voices, aren't there, in Australia from the Republican movement? What have they been saying?
Indeed, and I think the Queen's passing has set in motion a number of things. Parliament will be suspended for 15 days. There, of course, the gradual phasing out of the currency, because a new currency with King Charles III's face that's going to be on it. There's going to be a day of a memorial service day in a couple of weeks, but also the Queen's death has enlivened the Republican debate. Many Republicans are saying, as respectful as they are to the Queen and the person that she was and her dedication to duty, it is now time for Australia to decide on whether they want what they see as a foreign sovereign being the head of state or be a republic with a president. Interestingly, just a week before the Platinum Jubilee, a minister in Anthony Albanese's government was appointed just for this purpose, to see Australia on the road to becoming a republic. And I remember asking the Prime Minister at the time of marking the Queen's Jubilee, and I said, look, you're preparing for Australia to become a republic. When do you think this is going to happen? And he said, now is not the time. And I think even the staunchest Republican today here in Australia, while they feel very strongly about Australia becoming a republic with a president, will tell you now is not the time for that. There will be a time, there will be a referendum to ask people what they want. For now, it's about paying tribute to a queen that is seen here not just as head of state, but a true friend of Australia and a symbol of duty and service throughout the 70 years of her reign.
Sharma, thank you.
Our South Asia correspondent, Yogita Limai, is in Delhi. Yogita, hello. Now, Queen Elizabeth visited India, 3 times during her reign? How was she regarded there?
Well, so the reaction here has been a bit muted because it's been 25 years since the Queen's last visit, and it's been 75 years since India became an independent country. It's been trying to move away from its imperial past, and with that, its links with the British royal family, have become less significant over a period of time. It's also a difficult relationship because of the nature of colonial rule. But I think what's been evident in the reactions we have had here is that most people have chosen to look beyond the institution that the Queen represented to the person that she was. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi described her as a stalwart of our times. He said she personified dignity and decency in public life. His government has announced a day of state mourning, which will be held tomorrow. So across the country, flags will be flying at half-mast and no official events will be taking place. This is a society that really values a life spent in service, a life spent in duty. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of the tributes that are coming out here. There's a deep sense of respect for that. The fact that so many decades of her life was spent, in public service, and they were spent with dignity and decency.
Yogita, thank you very much. Yogita Limai there for us in Delhi.
6:44 is the time. Let's have a look at the images from Buckingham Palace this morning. We know that many people have been gathering. Indeed, we're told that many people stayed there overnight last night. It's looking magnificent this morning. And of course, has been a real focus for people who just want to share thoughts and be with other people to talk about the events that are happening now.
Also, how the Queen has always been a constant in so many of our lives. John Maguire has been among the crowds. He was there yesterday. He's back again this morning. John, morning to you. And I know, one of the things that really kind of brings this story home, brings this what's happened home, is like people's reactions, people's emotions and how they feel.
Charlie, I think you're absolutely right. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's a privilege to do our job, to say things, as it were, but it's really enabling people to use their own voices, to say what they're feeling. That's what really struck me about yesterday. We spoke to so many people here yesterday. Everybody had a different story. Everyone had a different reason for why they wanted to come here to Buckingham Palace. Everybody felt as if they had that personal link to Her Majesty, the Queen. Most of them, of course, in fact, pretty much everybody I spoke to yesterday would not have had the opportunity to meet her. Crowds building, and certainly in the last few minutes since we've been here, doubled in size, I would say, outside the front of Buckingham Palace now. You'll notice that there aren't any flowers, aren't any floral tributes. That's because overnight, and crews have spent the entire night moving them to Green Park. So there will be a special area set up there. And now they're asking members of the public not to lay flowers here, but to take them over to Green Park. But certainly the floral tributes here last night, until they started moving them, had built up to an extraordinary level. Let me introduce you to a group of new friends, people that we've gathered together who've come from near and far to talk to us this morning. Karen and Gina, firstly, sisters, good morning to you. You brought your flowers. You're about to take them to Green Park, as I say. Why was it important to come today, do you think?
Well, it's the end of an era. I mean, we haven't known anything other than the Queen. I would get a bit emotional.
It's all right,
no, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, so really wanted to come pay our respects, lay our flowers, and obviously watch the King's speech last night. Really wanted to show our support, get behind the new King as well.
Yeah. What did you make of the speech last night?
I thought it was very heartfelt. I think he comes across well. I just really hope that the country really gets behind him at this time, and we go forward really similar to the way we were. But yeah, I think he's going to be a good king.
Gina, it's been a difficult couple of days for so many people. Again, important for you to be here. Why?
As Karen said, I think it's just paying your respects. Seeing all the people here yesterday, it motivated me to think that it would definitely be the right thing to do. It just feels personal, feels like part of my family, so I just wanted to come and do the right thing.
And why do you feel that sort of personal link, do you think?
I don't know. just the Queen has always been there for us. I wouldn't say I'm a royalist as such, but they're a family that I feel for, and I just
She's
want
everybody's
to
grandma, isn't she?
Yes.
Everyone said that
Lots.
yesterday.
We do hear that
And
a
it is
lot.
everybody she is. You do
Yeah.
feel like you've lost your grandma.
It's wonderful to hear it over and over again. Emma, morning to you.
Morning.
You travelled down overnight
I
from
have.
Salford, I think, from
From
where
Salford,
Charlie and
yeah.
Nagger are
Yeah.
this morning. Again, why did you come?
Well, for me, it's history, and also the Queen's always been there from when I've been born. Been there for my mum, been there for my dad, been there for my nan, who's passed away. My granddad's, the nan and granddad's passed away, and I feel like for all of us, I need to send my respects to her because she's been there through tough times and happy times, and it's a very sad day because she is like your grandma, but it's time for us all to get together, send how much love we send to all the family, and hope that the King knows that we're all behind him.
And you saw the speech last night?
Saw the speech last night, it was very moving. I work in the school, so I rushed back from the school to see it, and very moving.
And how have the children been over the last couple of days?
It's been fine because I work with 3-year-olds, so at that age they don't really understand what's happening. But the older children in school have been very much like the Queen's died, especially after the Jubilee just so recently. We've all been celebrating that. I think it's brought it home more what actually has happened.
Yeah. We've seen a lot over the last couple of days of notes from children that have handwritten notes and placed them down. In fact, here's one here. Look, here's Teddy. Morning, Teddy, and Dad Michael. You've travelled a fair way as well. Tell us about your journey.
Yes, we've come from Leeds. We came over on the coach overnight. Slept most of the way, didn't we?
Yeah,
Teddy,
because we didn't sleep overnight.
You stayed up all night.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And tell me, why have you come, Teddy? Why have you come to London?
Because it's a sad day because the Queen has died, and we have just come here to see the new Queen, King.
Yeah.
King Charles III.
Oh. You're doing a lot better than many of us. Still getting
sharp.
used to saying King Charles III. And Michael, you brought your son. You come with your family. Again, why did you feel compelled to come?
Mirroring a lot of what's already been said. But yesterday we were on our way to school, listening to the news, and Teddy mentioned, he says, could we go down to London? And I just thought, it's a moment in history, why not? let's be a part of the history and let's come down and pay our respects.
How could you refuse?
Couldn't.
All right, folks, thank you so much indeed for talking to us this morning. So there you are, Charlie and Nagger, just a cross-section of people. I'm sure they won't mind me saying ordinary people. We're all ordinary people who felt compelled to come here to the gates of Buckingham Palace, the significant place to visit, to pay their respects, to spend a moment of reflection perhaps, and also to meet other people who feel also as if they have a link to Her Majesty the Queen, to her 7 decades of service. We'll talk to lots others, I'm sure, during the day. Certainly from what we saw yesterday, the crowd built and built and built. By the time I left yesterday, Constitution Hill, which is the road that runs just to the side of Buckingham Palace's back garden there, which is a huge back garden, the queue extended for about 300 metres or more, people joining it all the time just to come here and lay those floral tributes. But as I say, people now being asked to take them over to Green Park, but still people will come here to Buckingham Palace, the famous balcony, to think, to reflect, and perhaps to say thank you to Her Majesty the Queen. Back to you.
Thanks very much, John. It is good to hear affectionate tributes, from that little boy there, and taking the journey, because this is, as he says, his dad says, a moment in history.
Overnight coach, just to come and pay the respects, be part of history. So, we may have heard many tributes to the Queen over the last couple of days, and we know she had many interests and passions.
However, her famous discretion means we rarely heard her speak about what was personal to her.
So, after so much has been said about her, here's an insight into the remarkable life of Her Majesty in her own words.
I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and so it was all a very sudden kind of taking on and making the best job you can. It's a question of maturing into something that one's got used to doing. and accepting the fact that here you are and it's your fate. It is a job for life. These 25 years have seen much change for Britain. No longer an imperial power, we have been coming to terms with what this means for ourselves and for our relations with the rest of the world. Clothes-wise, does it look all right with the background?
Yes, it does.
I mean, Johnny, like, it'd be awful if you said no, because I don't know something else.
Yes, I mean, it's all right, Phil, is it?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whenever
you're ready, ma'am.
Red and green should never be seen, but never mind.
It's not the new inventions which are the difficulty. The trouble is caused by unthinking people who carelessly throw away ageless ideals as if they were old and outworn machinery. They would have religion thrown aside, morality in personal and public life made meaningless, honesty counted as foolishness, and self-interest set up in place of self-restraint. At this critical moment in our history, we will certainly lose the trust and respect of the world if we just abandon those fundamental principles which guided the men and women who built the greatness of this country and Commonwealth.
Most people have a job and then they go home. And in this existence, the job and the life go on together because you can't really divide it up. The boxes and the communications just keep on coming. And of course, with modern communications, they come even quicker. I mean, luckily I'm a quick reader, though I do rather begrudge some of the hours that I have to do instead of being outdoors. I have had quite a lot of prime ministers, starting with Winston, and some stayed longer than others.
Prime Minister, Your Majesty.
They unburden themselves, or they tell me what's going on, or if they've got any problems. And sometimes one can help in that way too. That's the sort of thing that happens to me when I talk in a crowd. They know that one can be impartial, so to speak. I think it's rather nice to feel that one's a sort of a sponge, and everybody can come and tell one things, and some things stay there, and some things go out the other ear, and some things never come out at all. One just knows about it. You know. The dresses and coats. I would have thought for the state visit to Austria, this might be very useful.
Yes, it'd be good.
Because it's got a wool coat, and in May one never knows, does one? Really? So that something like that, and that one.
The Venerable Thomas Dyson, Archdeacon of Udine.
I'm always absolutely fascinated by the people who come and all the things that they've done. I think that's very important, that the system does discover people who do unsung things, you know, and I think that's very satisfactory.
That's nice, lovely.
And I think people need pats on the back sometimes. It's a very dingy world otherwise. Our humble and hearty thanks to all those in Britain and around the world who have welcomed us and sustained us and our family in the good times and the bad so unstintingly over many years. It is you, if I may now speak to all of you directly, who have seen us through and helped us to make our duty fun. We are deeply grateful to you, each and every one. My goodness, I've been busy.
I declare before you all that my whole life whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
While we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
It's wonderful to hear Her Majesty's voice, actually.
It's the most simple thing, isn't it? And we say all the time, we just didn't hear her speak very often, and that was a compilation of those moments, key moments in time as well.
We're coming up to 7 o'clock. Let's see how the weather is looking. Stav can tell us.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Majesty and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Love, loyalty and duty. King Charles thanks his mother for her unwavering service and makes a solemn vow in his first address as monarch.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you.
As the throne passes from mother to son, Charles III will be formally proclaimed king at an historic ceremony at St James's Palace this morning.
At Buckingham Palace, tributes continue to pour in for the Queen, and in the areas surrounding Balmoral, people reflect on the loss of their neighbour and friend.
How much of a loss is it to this area?
Huge. Huge. Here is a neighbour. Here is somebody who was part of this community, who personally was part of this community. So when you lose somebody that close, it really, really affects individuals.
It's Saturday, the 10th of September. We're looking ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
That will happen at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace in London. For the first time in history, the announcement of the Accession Council will be televised.
We'll bring you more reflections from those who knew Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who died on Thursday afternoon, and bring you the latest tributes from across the UK and the Commonwealth.
First, our royal correspondent Danielle Ralph reports on King Charles' first full day as monarch, the emotional tribute to the Queen.
His first public appearance as king. Before official duty, he met the people at Buckingham Palace. The cameras stayed close. There was an informality, even a kiss from a well-wisher, amidst the condolences and chat. Then a poignant image. King Charles III and Camilla Queen Consort walked into the palace from where his mother had reigned for 7 decades, and from where he will now serve, all ahead of the King's first address to the nation.
Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. My life will of course change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others.
He thanked his wife and both his sons, making William and Catherine Prince and Princess of Wales.
With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan, as they continue to build their lives overseas.
He ended with a moving, personal tribute.
And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
A service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral saw senior politicians and members of the public reflect on a long reign. It ended with the national anthem. Now they sang God Save the King. And in a special BBC tribute programme last night, the Queen's children spoke personally about their mother.
It was a very special relationship, and apart from my three brothers, we're the only people who have that relationship, so that's how I remember her.
Today at St James's Palace, the new king will be officially proclaimed when the ceremonial body, the Accession Council, meets, a moment that will be televised for the first time.
We're now in a period of time where the country is both mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, alongside welcoming the reign of King Charles III. It is a mix of emotion and formality, an adjustment for everyone.
Over the weekend, we will get more details about plans for the coming days, including the date of the state funeral, when the royal family will lead the country's farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
And you could see in Daniela's report the tributes being paid at Buckingham Palace. Yesterday, King Charles received such a warm reception, and Joanna Gosling is there for us this morning. And Joanna, so many people we were hearing earlier from our colleague John Maguire, people travelling down from who aren't based in London, who aren't so close, from all over the country to visit, to pay their respects.
Absolutely, Naga. Coming in their thousands yesterday from all over, all ages. There were people here throughout the day and a large crowd here until 3 in the morning, and even through the night, people still coming. And if you look behind me now, the numbers are starting to grow again. Hundreds of people here as the day begins. And the floral tributes that we saw in the report from yesterday were actually moved overnight. It's going to be happening every night because they want to ensure that there's plenty of space for more floral tributes to come. I was speaking to some of those who've been doing that work overnight. They were working throughout the night, and they said that hundreds of thousands of floral tributes were here, and they're all being moved to a flower garden in Green Park, just very close to where we're standing. There are also candles burning through the night, and teddies of Paddington Bear, of course, remembering that sketch, that brief film that the Queen made just months ago with Paddington Bear here at Buckingham Palace for the Platinum Jubilee. And we saw King Charles III and his Queen Consort Camilla arrive here yesterday and take some time to speak to members of the crowd here, and the message very much was sorrow and gratitude for the life and the service of the Queen, and also a very warm welcome for King Charles III, who seemed to really take comfort from the kind words of those he met who were in the crowd, and we heard repeated shouts of God Save the King. Well, we have seen a real mix of the ceremony, the personal, that direct interaction with the crowd, and there will be much more of the ceremony today and the formal duty, because King Charles will formally be proclaimed king at a ceremony this morning. Of course, he was king from the moment his mother passed away, but there will be that formal ceremony today, and after that he will be back here to Buckingham Palace, which is where he will again greet the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. He greeted her here yesterday. They had an audience already here yesterday. There'll also be members of the cabinet coming, and the Archbishop of Canterbury. But let's take a look back again at the tributes and the people who have felt compelled to come here to Buckingham Palace. Graham Satchell has this report.
Look at the streets around Buckingham Palace, heaving with people, many carrying bunches of flowers and handwritten tributes. The queues stretching as far as the eye can see.
It's incredibly emotional, actually. It's like a feeling in your stomach as you're walking around. It means so much to people. Something about being here as well just evokes, so much emotion.
I think she's been absolutely fantastic, really selfless and devoted. So I just felt I really wanted to come and just be part of this, to be like a thank you to her for everything that she's done in those 70 years for this country.
She just had that wonderful ability to be personable to people. Precious. Very, very special. Yeah.
Privileged to come.
Privileged to come. Oh, I'm very sorry.
St Paul's Cathedral and a service of remembrance for Her Majesty the Queen. St Paul's was open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis, so there were more queues, almost 2,000 people waiting in line to pay tribute.
The Queen has been an incredible leader and has endured so much, and what she took on from such a young age, so soon after losing her father, is so inspiring. No matter what your views are on any of this, I think that you can, as a human, be inspired by that and respect that.
What did the Queen mean to you? Constant stability in the country, just that one constant. Like Boris said, she was timeless. And she's the mother of the country.
For a brief moment, the heavens opened. It couldn't have been more British. A queue for the Queen in the rain. For some here, the last 2 days, a reminder of 1965 and the funeral of Winston Churchill.
It's one of my earliest memories, really, standing on the balcony of somebody's office and watching the mile-long cortege go by. So,
feel like we've sort of come full circle?
It kind of feels a bit that way, I think probably the Queen is the most loved Brit since Churchill, and that's why we're all here.
At all the various places in and around London where people have gathered to remember the Queen, the feeling is the same. It is quiet, serious, dignified, and the sentiments expressed are the same. It's a mix of heartfelt respect and a profound sense of loss.
Windsor Castle, the place the Queen called home, and again more flowers and quiet contemplation.
If there's been one constant in our lives in Britain, it's been the Queen, and I think it's just her sense of duty was obviously the thing that drove her, so I think she's just an amazing role model for both, younger and older generations.
It feels strange because so many people here, it's quite quiet, it's very quiet, and it's just sort of like, it's lovely to see sort of everybody coming together to show their respects, really. I was thinking about it yesterday, sort of like she was probably everybody's second mum. She was just there for everybody, really. She's such a nice person.
Back at Buckingham Palace, the new monarch, King Charles, and the start of a transition, not just in the transfer of constitutional power, but also in mood, smiles, and handshakes.
He was very thankful for people coming out, and he just seemed very pleased to be here, and he appreciated people being here.
We are at the end of an era, and as one chapter of history closes, another is opening. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
And the King really did seem to take comfort here yesterday from the kindness and the gratitude that was shown to him and to the memory of his mother from so many. And he, of course, is a king in mourning. And it's going to be a transition for him, the same as for everybody else. We are seeing history, of course, unfolding as he goes through the process of moving towards, through all of those formal moments as he becomes established as King Charles III. But for now, this very much is a focus for the people here. It is the seat of the monarchy in
London. It's not currently the residence of King Charles, although the Royal Standard is flying at full mast as it was since he arrived here yesterday. He will be back here later for some of his formal duties, but for now we understand he has remained at his current residence along with the Queen Consort, Clarence House, not very far away. There you can see a lot of preparations made for the anticipated large crowds who are expected here today and in the days ahead. Back to you in the studio.
Joanna, thanks very much.
So just staying on the shot there of Buckingham Palace, those who know London will know that just down the road from Buckingham Palace is St James's Palace, and that is where one of the formal events will be taking place today, 10 a.m. this morning. James Landale is there for us, our diplomatic correspondent. Very good morning to you, James. We're all on a learning curve, aren't we, about the procedures, about what happens here, because it's been so long since we had these events take place. And today at St James's Palace, where you are on the balcony behind you, this is one of those moments.
Yeah, that's right, Charlie. What we're going to see today is the formal sort of procedural constitutional niceties and details that are sorted out after the extraordinary thing that happens, the fact that the king becomes king automatically when the Queen dies. So essentially what's going to happen today is the King's most senior advisors, 200 of the most senior officials, ministers, 14 diplomats from the 14 realms, some judges, and various others who will come here together as what's called the Accession Council here at St James's Palace, and they will formally sort out all the details. They'll agree the proclamation that's going to be made, they will hear various declarations. The King will then join that meeting. That will then become a meeting of his first Privy Council, his most senior advisors, body dating back since Norman times. And the King will do various procedural things. He'll have to agree things called orders in council to allow for the continuity of government and things like that. And then once all that's been sorted, that'll take about an hour or so, then the proclamation will be made. From that balcony just behind me, a chap called the Garter King of Arms will make this proclamation. And essentially what this is what's happened in old times. Before we had social media, this was the moment when a public official would stand up in front of the people and say, look, the previous monarch has died, and this is the identity of the new sovereign. That proclamation will be made here, then it will be made in the City of London, and then in the coming 24 hours around the nation. So essentially this is the formal moment when people are told the Queen is dead, and this is who the new monarch will be.
James, thank you very much. Just a reminder for you, those events at 10 a.m. This morning, and full coverage, of course, on the BBC.
Now, King Charles III has given new titles to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, William and Catherine. They now include the Prince and Princess of Wales. Let's go to our Wales correspondent, Hal Griffith, who's in Cardiff. Hal, morning to you. Sun shining over Cardiff Castle. How did people feel about them embracing, welcoming William and Catherine as the Waleses?
Well, they're a couple known here in Wales. They spent time living in Anglesey when William worked as a search and rescue helicopter pilot. But I think the speed of the announcement yesterday has surprised some people. And we know that it is a question which divides people here in Wales, whether there should be a Prince of Wales. It's not a title which passes automatically to the heir. Prince Charles spent 60 years in that title. But some people question whether modern Wales, with its devolved power and government, should have someone who lives outside of Wales as its prince. Now, in terms of official response, well, the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has said he looks forward to welcoming the Prince and Princess and deepening their relationship. The Welsh Conservatives also echoing that. But others, such as Plaid Cymru, have said maybe there should be a debate over whether the people of Wales want this. We have to go back to the Middle Ages to see the last native-born Prince of Wales, well, the rebel Prince Owain Glyndŵr or Llywelyn ein Lliw Olaf. These were Welshmen who held that title. That's not something that's happened since the Middle Ages. And we know that opinion polls from earlier this year suggest that just under half of people in Wales think this title should be kept, about 46% according to a poll for ITV Wales in June. 31% saying they didn't want a new Prince of Wales, and about 20% of people saying they just didn't know. So people wake up to the news this morning, start to get used to this huge amount of change. I think it's fair to say that there is a debate over whether or not Wales should have a new prince who doesn't actually live here. That might be something that the Waleses, as I suppose we get used to calling them, may want to look at. Prince Charles has a residence here in Wales and is a patron of lots of little societies. He's been involved with Welsh life. Is that something that William will want to do? He's already patron of the Welsh Rugby Union. However, Catherine is the patron of the English RFU and William is the president of the English Football Association. So it might make for an interesting time when Wales play England in the World Cup later this year. Who will he support?
Indeed. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. That's obvious, something for the future. Hal, thank you very much.
Time now is 7:20. Let's turn our attention now to the House of Commons. Packed, of course, yesterday with MPs dressed in black and sharing their memories of meeting the Queen.
The atmosphere, if you watched, you would have seen unusually hushed and sombre by parliamentary standards. And some of the stories they told gave rather poignant insights into the Queen's kindness. Some even raised a smile.
I remember innocent joy more than 10 years ago after the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, when I told her that the leader of a friendly Middle Eastern country seemed actually to believe that she had jumped out of a helicopter in a pink dress and parachuted into the stadium.
I remember one picnic at Balmoral which was taking place in one of the bothes on the estate. The hampers came from the castle and we all mucked in to put the food and drink out on the table. I picked up some cheese, put it on a plate and was transferring it to the table. The cheese fell on the floor. I had a split-second decision to make. I picked up the cheese, put it on the plate and put it on the table. And I turned round to see that my every move had been watched very carefully by Her Majesty the Queen. I looked at her. She looked at me, and she just smiled. And the cheese remained on the table.
I went up to the palace where, like the other new secretaries of state, she pointed me to the Privy Council and bestowed on me the seals of office. But when just a year later I was sacked, and the seals taken out of the safe and taken back to Buckingham Palace, my diary was empty and my phone stopped ringing. My office was astonished to get a call from Buckingham Palace. No one else wanted to have anything to do with me, but the Queen wanted to see me. I was invited to take tea with the Queen for her to thank me for my service as Secretary of State.
Well, I'm delighted to say we're able to speak to Harriet Harman, who you just heard from there in the Commons, Labour's former Deputy Leader, joining us from Westminster. Very good to speak to you this morning. Can you just reflect a little bit for us? You were in the House of Commons yesterday, and those glimpses we saw, real mixture of emotions, which in reality I think probably reflects a lot of the nation, where people are fondly remembering, sad possibly, but able to laugh and smile at the times that have passed.
Well, I think we were remembering very much that there was a grieving family here, but also valuing and celebrating the close interwoven connection between the Queen and Parliament. You know, we're a constitutional monarchy. The Queen was the head of state for 70 years, but we were her Parliament. And what she did is she supported Parliament actively over those decades, but she never interfered and meddled. But it wasn't just a ceremonial relationship with her coming to do the state opening in Parliament and signing off our bills. It was a personal relationship as well, but one of encouragement and empowerment. So she did her job absolutely to the utmost. And part of her job was to support us to do our job as MPs in Parliament to the utmost.
I love the thought, Harriet. If I may ask you, and you can tell me what you wish, tea with the Queen. Lots of people are sharing their moments with the Queen, and I know you had many over many years, but tea with the Queen, how was that?
Well, it was a very small little private room, and there were just two very ordinary chairs in front of, as everybody says, a little electric fire. And but I think, as Theresa May said, it's the one meeting you can have in politics where you're absolutely sure nobody will leak any information about it or brief it to the press. It was just an entirely private meeting, but a very purposeful one, because I was no longer a Secretary of State, I was no longer in the Cabinet, but I was still an MP, I was still in Parliament, I was still elected by the people of Camberwell and Peckham, and I was to get on with my job. And I think she was very much everybody's got to get on with their job in whatever circumstances. And really all MPs yesterday talked about how she'd visited their constituents. They'd all met her because she'd gone all around the country, and what a very active role she played. But it was underpinning our democratic system, but never intervening in it.
Harriet Harman, good morning. It's Naga. I know you have fought tirelessly for progression for women in politics, for feminism as well. And the Queen herself, she broke many, many barriers herself as a female, as a princess, and as the Queen.
I mean, really, it's astonishing when you think back on it, because there we were in 1952, and what people thought was that men should be in charge and women should support them. Women were subservient. That, the best thing a woman could do was find herself a husband, get married, have his children, and then support him. And men were the authority figures and women were subservient. And to think in that context that this 25-year-old young married woman with 2 children stepped forward to play a leading role in our nation, and a leading role for our nation on the world stage. What extraordinary courage and bravery that must have taken. And the prime ministers that she saw were all twice her age and all men, but you never got any sense that she was deferential to them, because she had the weight of her office on her. But women all around the world, as well as in this country, could see a woman as an authority figure. So she was an absolute trailblazer in that way. She did make it all look easy, but she was actually being the monarch, as well as having children and then grandchildren. And I mean, she was remarkable. It's an overused word, but she was really extraordinary.
What was the feeling like in the Commons yesterday? You touched upon it, with reflections, and there were humorous stories as well as ones tinged with sadness, weren't there?
Well, I think, everybody was remembering. We were gathered in the wake of a death that had happened just a few hours earlier, but also, really, for the first time, everybody, and it was absolutely jam-packed, everybody dressed in black, everybody talking about their own personal experience. And it shows what an active and interconnected role she played, but she never overstepped the boundaries. She did her job, and hers, she felt, obviously, we were her parliament, it's her government, it's HMG, Her Majesty's government. Her job was to actually actively support us to get on with ours. And I think she crafted that role. I don't think the previous monarch did that. But, at a time when Parliament is often denigrated, she never sided with those who would undermine Parliament and denigrate it. She was always strongly supportive.
Harriet, very quickly, of course, people start looking to the future, and last night was a very significant moment. You'll have seen many very important speeches in your time in Parliament and elsewhere. King Charles addressing the nation. What are your reflections on what you felt and what you heard?
Well, I think it's all anticipation now as to how much he's going to do it in the way she did, or whether or not he's going to take it forward in a different way. I think everybody's just taken the view that she was just a total 100% success. It is a huge footsteps for him to step into, but I'm sure that we'll just be anticipating how he changes the role and makes it his own, as they say. But we've got some formalities to do today. We're all the Privy Council is going to meet in St James's Palace. We're going to be what's called the Accession Council, which is a very ancient tradition. We're going to proclaim the King. And then after we've done that proclamation, us MPs are going to go back to the House of Commons and we have to swear an oath of allegiance to the new King, because we can only do our work as MPs in a constitutional monarchy if we have sworn the oath of allegiance. So we will be filing into the House of Commons this afternoon and swearing a new oath of allegiance to King Charles.
Harriet Harman, do you do that all separately, or is it done as a group moment when you sign it?
It's one by one. It's one by one. You hold the Bible in your hand, or other religious text, or you affirm, and you have to read out your oath, and you have to swear to an oath of allegiance to the King. We are a constitutional monarchy, but the brilliance of it is that we are a constitutional monarchy where we have the monarch, who is hereditary, but we have the MPs who are elected, and the system knits together in that way.
And you're also, as a Privy Councillor, just to go back to the accession today, what part will you play when the proclamation takes place?
Well, we'll all be in St James's Palace, and then we'll all make the decision. It's a formal decision. We'll make the decision that the new monarch should be King Charles, and then he comes in, and then we do the proclamation, which is telling the people of this country that he is their new king, that he is now officially endorsed, proclaimed. It's difficult to get the sort of, Norman words for it, but that's when he actually becomes the new monarch.
It's a moment in history. You're going to be part of a moment in history, aren't you?
It is very much, but it's the structure and the foundation of our democracy. I think it was very interesting. The Prime Minister Liz Truss said that the Queen was the rock on which our country was built. Well, the monarchy is the rock on which our Parliament stands. So it's very much a Parliament and the monarch day to day.
Harriet Harman, it's been fascinating talking to you this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you ahead as well, of course, of the proclamation later today. Harriet Harman, their Mother of the House, a member of the Accession Council. And we should say, so that happens at 10 o'clock today, a moment in history, of course, and it's going to be televised for the first time ever. So from 9:30, there will be more programming on the BBC looking ahead to that, and of course, taking you through that process. First time that television cameras have been allowed to film it.
It's just interesting, isn't it? Harriet Harman, who has worked in the Privy Council for so long, even she is struggling with some of the terminology around this, which we all know more about after the ceremonies today, the accession ceremony and then the proclamation itself. That will all unfold during the morning.
It's just after 7:30. Stav is going to tell us how the weather's looking.
Good morning. It's 7:34 on Saturday morning. You're watching BBC Breakfast. We are looking ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
He's meeting the Accession Council at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace. That event will be televised for the first time, and then a public announcement will be made in the City of London. Similar declarations will follow in Belfast, Cardiff and Edinburgh tomorrow.
More reflections, of course, on the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose body remains in Balmoral today. Floral tributes are being laid outside that castle, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Sandringham, and in many other venues across the UK and the Commonwealth.
Now, the Queen's 4 children have shared their favourite memories of their mother, including her sense of humour and love of family holidays.
Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward were all interviewed in advance of Her Majesty's death for a special programme which went out on BBC One last night. Let's have a look.
I was very lucky to have her as a mother.
She was always the Queen because that was really important for all of us. But she was always my mother, so that is how you would remember her.
The happiest times inevitably that we'd spend together would be on holidays. So Balmoral and Sandringham stand out very, very clearly as favourite places. because of the time that we spent together as a family.
Oh, why have they done that?
Save your trouble.
She always took great interest in things I was doing. You know. I remember when I was sent off to school and everywhere else, I was always accompanied by a note saying I was to be treated just like everybody else.
She was working, and so we didn't see much of her during the day because of the duties, but in the evening, just the same as any other family, we would get together. We would always see them at weekends. We would always go down to Windsor Castle.
We'll see if this is strong enough to... Get off, get off. I want it to move.
We weren't appendages that should be seen and not heard. We were definitely the priority.
What do you want now? What do you want to have? Rolling. Ice cream. Eat ice cream. This is what he really would like. Yes, you always go straight for the ice cream.
The relationship was patently about periods away, doing things which couldn't be altered, programmes which were set, an attempt to always have a sort of regular time slot for the children.
Britannia was particularly special. Those were the times when probably felt that, the Queen was the most relaxed and was the furthest away from the pressures of the job and the state.
Such very personal insights there, and also the archive footage is just delightful.
Beautiful,
some of those images. The full programme, Tribute to Her Majesty the Queen, is available to watch on the BBC iPlayer.
Now, many members of the royal family, the Queen's children, are still at Balmoral Castle, where, of course, Her Majesty died on Thursday. Our colleague Anita McVeigh is outside the castle. Very public events, many planned, of course, Anita, morning to you. But we mustn't forget that a family is still grieving there at that family home.
Morning to you, Naga, and Charlie. Morning, everyone. Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, this is about a family who have lost a much-loved mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and they are mourning privately as well as publicly, and particularly when you look at King Charles. Obviously, he has prepared for this role for many, many years, but nonetheless, now that the moment has arrived, you've got to think of an individual who is mourning the loss of his mother, but yes, yet thrust into all the responsibilities of being king and taking on that role. Here at Balmoral, in the last few minutes, we've seen a couple of dozen stewards arrive. They have been placing some barriers here along the road leading right up to the gates, so when people come, and I expect they've done this because they are expecting huge crowds of people to arrive here today. People will come from the car parks over the Balmoral Bridge, walk down the road behind me here, up to the gates of Balmoral to add to the flowers. Now, since I was here yesterday, the number of bouquets has grown. I expect that certainly to continue today. I was in the town of Ballater, that's the nearest town to Balmoral, yesterday afternoon, chatting to some people who were running the coach service from the town here to Balmoral. Lots of people queuing up for that, and they were saying that would be running today from early all the way through late into the evening. And just opposite the bus stop, the church in the centre of Ballater, Glenmick Church, with books of condolence, and off to the side of the church, a grassy area with a photograph of the Queen as a focal point for more tributes. So again, I think we're going to be seeing a really busy scene here today, with lots of people coming to pay their respects and reading the messages on those cards. For the moment, back to you in the studio.
Anita, thanks very much.
There's been referenced many times just how special Balmoral was to the Queen. She described it as the place where she was most happy.
Our Scotland correspondent, Lorna Gordon, has been talking to some of those in the area who got to know her.
Nestling between the river and the hills, the villages of Royal Deeside. From her childhood through her years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth spent her summers relaxing here, a monarch and also a neighbour.
My auntie worked in the local grocer's shop there, and I remember distinctly one day walking outside the door and the Queen was sitting on a horse. But she chatted and said hello, and it was perfectly natural. And that's what it was always like. You know, it wasn't very official or anything like that. It was relaxed and that, and that's how I'll always remember it.
When floods devastated Ballater, the local minister was asked to provide regular updates to the Queen. She kept across what was happening and also how she could help.
She came to the church to thank all the volunteers during the flood, and an interest. When she spoke to you, you were the only person in the world. That's what you felt. She gave you your full attention and she was fully engrossed in what you were saying.
How much of a loss is it to this area?
Huge. Huge. Here is a neighbour. Here is somebody who was part of this community, who personally was part of this community. So when you lose somebody that close, it really, really affects individuals.
Wilma Muir spent decades working at Balmoral, heartbroken at the Queen's death, but sustained by recollections of the interest she took in her staff's lives.
I had a little smart car, you know, the little half-sized ones, and she said, "What sort of car is that? It looks like a little egg box." But, you know, she didn't forget, she doesn't forget faces. She remembers everything.
I'm here, and there's the Queen.
So many with stories to tell.
And then a few weeks later, we were invited down to Balmoral to perform for her. And it was one of the highlights of my life. She tapped her foot and she was sort of jiggling about to the music as we were dancing. I'm pretty sure she enjoyed it.
The Queen was patron of the Braemar gathering for 70 years. It wasn't always this sunny, and she took the changeable Scottish weather in her stride.
It was a very wet gathering day, and as she was getting out of the car, unfortunately it was a bit soggy, and she said, "Oh, my shoes are sinking." But she just laughed about it and took a step to the other side.
Those here said her humour was often on show.
Every time I've met the Queen, virtually I've worn a kilt. And the comment was, it's nice to see somebody come as themselves, because everybody else normally wore a suit or something and then were dressed up for the occasion, but she'd always seen me virtually dressed up.
Sharing fond memories and saluting the country's longest serving monarch.
The Queen.
Lorna Gordon, BBC News on Royal Deeside.
Now, you would have seen the pictures of Buckingham Palace, which has seen huge crowds gather since the news of Her Majesty's death was announced. Thousands more people are expected to gather today to pay their tributes.
Let's show you the images this morning on Saturday morning. This shot shows you, of course, the Mall looking down towards Buckingham Palace. Such a familiar scene for so many people. And in fact, I think you're getting a sense probably this morning of some of the preparations that are beginning, the vehicles that are there, some of the barriers that are being put up. John Maguire is there for us this morning, John. And what we know already and what is to come, presumably over the next 7 to 10 days, so many people just wanting to be there and share a moment with one another and share their stories.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Charlie. Buckingham Palace, of course, a focal point for the monarchy in the place, well, one of the places the Queen would have called home for the last 70 years or so, so it feels the right place for people to come to spend a few moments, to reflect, just spend their own personal time, really, and think about what the Queen meant to them, what her 7 decades of service meant to them. They all have their own reasons of coming here. I'll just show you the crowds are really starting to build up again as they did yesterday. People are being asked not to leave flowers here, but to take them over to Green Park. But still, these are some of the items that are just at the gates of Buckingham Palace there. Paddington Bears have been very popular. I've seen lots of toy Paddington Bears around. And then just to the side of it, look at that extraordinary crown sculpture, that bouquet of flowers, hydrangeas there. People have gone to amazing effort, really, and many of the notes and cards that people have written have been very heartfelt. We've grabbed again a group of strangers who are new friends, I think it's fair to say. Rekha and David, good morning to you. Rekha, what does your card there say?
So on this one is "We love you, Rekha, David and the Go Hill family." And the Queen has sent various cards to my late great-grandmother, who passed away in 2001. Excuse me, 1991.
Okay.
She lived till 103.
So we used to call it a telegram from the Queen.
So the telegram from the Queen is up in place in our living room.
And some wedding anniversary ones as well.
And some wedding anniversary cards. And the last one would have been in February of this year for my parents' 76th wedding anniversary.
What did it mean to them to receive those cards?
Oh, it's just like my dad said, have you written to the palace? And I said, yes, Dad. All organised, and it means so much to not just my parents but to the whole family. And I had to write a card and everything.
Wonderful.
You know.
David, you're a Londoner.
Yes.
You may even go past this place every day, but it seems to have taken on a new significance today.
It always does. It's a magical place, it really is. And you can see from people all over the world are coming here, and we're privileged to have been here all this time. When I was born, we were in Majesty and there was a king. So the Queen's been around for all of my life, and how magnificent has she been in everything. And that's what people are reflecting on now. And it just gets to you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful.
Seriously.
Great to see you both. Let's talk to Dean and to Charlie and to Lena from Northamptonshire.
Yes.
Guys, come down specially. Tell me why.
It's just such a loss. You know, it's the whole country almost feels like you've lost a grandmother, and it feels really personal. And we, on Thursday, we said we have to come. We have to be a part of this national mourning and celebration of life, as well as to reigning the new king.
And tell me why that word you use, we have to be there. Why did you feel that?
Because, you know, we're like, 29, 31, so all we've known is the Queen, really, and we've sort of grown up with her, and she's the most constant thing that we've had. So, then to lose that, sort of, we decided we have to come, we have to see the atmosphere, soak it all in, and just be part of this national mourning effectively. So that's why we had to do it.
Lena, you saw the King's speech last night.
Yes.
What did you make of it?
Oh, he did wonderfully well, and to see the man evolve overnight from prince to a king was amazing, and I think he's going to be a fine king.
So you felt as if you saw that transition?
Oh, absolutely. From the moment that he and Camilla walked through those gates, he had a different persona about him, and it was lovely.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed, folks. Great to spend some time with you this morning. Wonderful to hear those different perspectives, isn't it? Fascinating to hear. Sometimes people say very similar things about the Queen, feeling as if she was the nation's mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, but also new perspectives as well on King Charles III. Join us later. We'll talk to many more people. Everybody has their own story, and it's really, really interesting to hear them, isn't it? Back to you.
It absolutely is, John. Thank you so much. We'll be back with you down in and around Buckingham Palace a little later on this morning.
It must be remembered that the Queen was part of a wartime generation. It embodied duty and sacrifice. When she was just 18, Princess Elizabeth joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the army, and trained as a mechanic.
Our special correspondent Fergal Keane has been to meet three members of that generation to ask what Her Majesty the Queen meant to them.
She grew to adulthood as her country fought for its life. A fight Princess Elizabeth inspired in uniform and on the airwaves.
We children at home are full of cheerfulness and courage. We are trying to do all we can to help our gallant sailors, soldiers and airmen.
In the broad expanse of mid-Atlantic, units of the British Navy guard the ocean that is the most vital battle zone of the war.
As Allied convoys braved German U-boats, Princess Elizabeth joined hundreds of thousands of young women in uniform, like Patricia Outram, a naval codebreaker.
She did exactly what I would have expected her to do, and did volunteer, and was active and in some ways equal to the other young women in the services. So I think we grew up very much with the idea that you participate. You don't sort of watch from the sidelines. You have a responsibility to defend your country.
But this is also the story of a vision, of a country that represented a civilised sanctuary for survivors of the Nazi genocide.
I thought it was the best choice of my life. I literally thought I arrived in heaven when I first came to England.
For Auschwitz survivor Ivor Pearl, 13 when he came, the princess symbolised hope.
Am I right in saying that she represented safety to you? Very much so. Safety, security, and love, and especially I was as I 13 years old, lost everything, so I just thought that it was like a substitute parent.
The struggle for the survival of a free United Kingdom saw young men risk their lives day after day in bombing raids over Germany. Flight Lieutenant Colin Bell knew what it was to lose his friends to the war. Now 101, he mourns the loss of a queen and that sense of united wartime purpose she embodied.
The Queen was a perfect example of duty. She said right at the onset that she was going to devote her life to the service of the nation. That she saw as duty. She has gone after setting a matchless example, and sadly we shall never see the like of her again.
Second Subaltern Elizabeth Windsor, whose life and that of the generation she came from was shaped by war and its fearsome burdens. Fergal Keane, BBC News.
Let's talk now to the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, who's at Buckingham Palace for us this morning. Admiral, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You know, I think so many people would have easily forgotten that the Queen, you know, was in service and had skills way beyond what we may think a Queen would have today. What was the significance for those in the military, those who do serve, knowing that she had had that experience?
Good morning. I think it was very significant that Her Majesty served the nation. She was incredibly keen to do so in the Second World War and persuaded her father to allow her to do that. And I think it just reflects her commitment to the nation, and it was the fact that she was one of us and we always sought to serve her. And the relationship was both professional and personal. She came from a military family. Her father was in the Royal Navy. She married a naval officer. She had children that served in the armed forces. She had grandchildren that served in the British Army and the Royal Air Force. And I think it's this combination of professional and personal relationship. And hence you see the love and affection, not only in the nation, but also very much in her armed forces and now His Majesty's armed forces.
And knowing that she understood what those who serve do face, the prospect, the very real prospect of what they face in terms of fate, how is her death being reflected? What impressions are you getting from those you're talking to now?
Inevitably, it's a mix of emotions. It's sadness, it's a reflection of her service, what she exemplified, that commitment, selflessness. I think it's also the fact that she was so special to us. People would have a visit from the Queen, whether to their air station, to their regiment, to their ship, and they would see her warmth for us, her interest in everything that we do, her interest that also extended to the families and friends, that we were looking after the whole community. And so this was a professional and personal relationship, and one that was very special. And you saw a little of that with the Platinum Jubilee. That was an opportunity for us to express our gratitude, our thanks to Her Majesty and for her service on behalf of the whole nation and the relationship that she had with her armed forces.
Sir Tony, it's lovely talking to you this morning. I see, you know, very proudly wearing your uniform today. I'd just like to sort of go back to the moment you mentioned ago, Queen, very young, 18 years old when she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And I'm reading my notes here. This is probably things you know very well. Her first military appointment, this is 1947. On her 21st birthday, she becomes Colonel-in-Chief of the Balaclava Company, 5th Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, at 21 years old. You know, the duty, we've talked so much about her, and the responsibilities that she's had over the years for such a young age, including with the military.
Yes, and as part of that duty, I think what we experienced, particularly in those very early days, was the example that had been set by her father, King George VI, and that enabled her, as well as her personal experience of serving in uniform, to understand the military and all that entailed. And I also think we have to reflect that she was part of a Second World War generation, where obviously the military dominated the country whilst we were at war. And I think those are the anchors in terms of the relationship that we continue to have throughout her reign. A personal, professional, incredible interest in everything that we did. And it's rooted in this strength of that Second World War generation, incredible sacrifice, incredible commitment and service to the nation.
So Tony, can I ask you, if you like, for almost a more personal note here? I mean, the military, indeed like the Queen herself, often sort of known for their stoicism and, keeping things on the straight and narrow. I dare say there have been military leaders, maybe you know them yourself, maybe you're one of them, who's encountered the Queen at times and it's had an impact.
Yes, Her Majesty was very generous with her time for the armed forces. That extended to visits to various units, but it also extended to private audiences that each of the heads of the armed forces have with the sovereign. My last audience with Her Majesty was in March at Windsor Castle, and people have touched on her ability to put you at ease. This is in an elegant drawing room in Windsor Castle. You're alone with Her Majesty, and there are 3 corgis wandering around the room. And we reflected on her service back with the Second World War and some of the skills that she learned there, particularly on the mechanical side. But it also goes into this incredible perspective. I was briefing her on the invasion by Russia into Ukraine, and that then triggers the ability to have a conversation and to gain her wisdom from somebody that has met nearly all of the Russian leaders. She started her reign with Stalin, and then she's met President Putin twice, and her ability to reflect and to offer those insights is something that's very, very special. And I think you've heard glimpses of what that means for some of us who are privileged to have those audiences.
So Tony, I mean, it is fascinating what you're saying, and we're hearing more from people who've had those moments as you have, very, very privileged moments. What I also hear from so many other people is her curiosity. You were telling her things, but we know from all the encounters she had, she was always inquiring of other people.
It was inquiring, it was curious, it extended to families and checking that her servicemen and servicewomen and their families were fine and being looked after. But it also was, it was very warm. My recollections are of the lovely smiles, a gentle sense of humour, sometimes a teasing. If I offer another audience example, when I was the First Sea Lord, you're inevitably slightly anxious. Her Majesty puts you at ease. You've got some things that you want to say. I mentioned that I thought I was her 24th First Sea Lord, and she smiled and said, "Please stop. You're making me feel old." It's those sort of glimpses and the warmth of the relationship, and it extended from those elements to big geopolitical conversations. A remarkable privilege to be able to have those conversations.
Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, Chief of the Defence Staff. It's a real privilege having you on our programme this morning, and thank you for sharing those insights. Thank you very much.
The time is just after 8 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with our headlines this morning. Love, loyalty and duty. King Charles thanks his mother for her unwavering service and makes a solemn vow in his first address as monarch.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you.
As the throne passes from mother to son, Charles III will be formally proclaimed king, an historic ceremony here at St James's Palace this morning.
At Buckingham Palace, tributes continue to pour in for the Queen as people reflect on her reign.
She just had that wonderful ability to be personable to people. Precious. Very, very special. Yeah.
Privilege to come.
Privilege to come.
Good morning. It's Saturday, the 10th of September. We're looking ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
It will happen at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace in London. For the first time in history, the announcement by the Accession Council will be televised.
So we'll bring you more reflections from those who knew Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, who died on Thursday afternoon. We'll also bring you the latest tributes from across the UK and the Commonwealth.
First, our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph reports on King Charles' first full day as monarch.
His first public appearance as king. Before official duty, he met the people at Buckingham Palace. The cameras stayed close. There was an informality, even a kiss from a well-wisher, amidst the condolences and chat. Then a poignant image. King Charles III and Camilla Queen Consort walked into the palace from where his mother had reigned for 7 decades, and from where he will now serve, all ahead of the King's first address to the nation.
Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. My life will of course change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others.
He thanked his wife and both his sons, making William and Catherine Prince and Princess of Wales.
With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas.
He ended with a moving, personal tribute.
And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
A service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral saw senior politicians and members of the public reflect on a long reign. It ended with the national anthem. Now they sang God Save the King. And in a special BBC tribute programme last night, the Queen's children spoke personally about their mother.
It was a very special relationship, and apart from my three brothers, we're the only people who have that relationship, so that's how I remember her.
Today at St James's Palace, the new king will be officially proclaimed when the ceremonial body, the Accession Council, meets, a moment that will be televised for the first time. We're now in a period of time where the country is both mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, alongside welcoming the reign of King Charles III. It is a mix of emotion and formality, an adjustment for everyone. Over the weekend, we will get more details about plans for the coming days, including the date of the state funeral, when the royal family will lead the country's farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
So let's find out a little more about those events, the formal events that will be taking place today. 10 a.m. this morning, our diplomatic correspondent James Landale is at the palace for us. This is St James's Palace, just down the road, James, from Buckingham Palace. And just explain to us, because we're on a learning curve, aren't we, all of us, about these formalities, these councils, and just what will play out today.
Yeah, what we're going to see is something that doesn't happen very often, only when we have a new monarch. And essentially this is the moment when, not when the king becomes king, we know that's happened already the moment the Queen died, but this is the moment when that is proclaimed to the world. His identity is confirmed to people. So essentially what's going to happen is there'll be a meeting here at St James's Palace at about 10 o'clock. About 200 of the most senior ministers, officials, 14 diplomats from the realms. There'll be holders of the great offices of state. They form the Accession Council. They'll come here and they'll agree lots of constitutional niceties involving the accession to the throne of King Charles. Then after about 20 minutes, they will then move to join the king. That will become a meeting of the Privy Council, effectively the oldest and most senior advisory council to the king. The king will swear various oaths. He'll agree various orders in council to allow for the continuity of government. And then once all that's been sorted, after about an hour or so, the formal proclamation will be read out from that balcony up there. As you can see, the window that's open there. And that will essentially say to the people, the king is the king, and this is his identity. This was at a time before we had social media and newspapers and things like that. And this was when a formal announcement was made to the people. It will be made here, it will be made subsequently in the City of London, and then in the coming 24 hours around the nation. So essentially, it's the moment when the accession to the throne becomes public and becomes formal from behind the closed doors.
One of the things I think a lot of people are very mindful of this time is that sense of duty, which we know that the royal family holds so dear, the Queen particularly so. But right now, of course, King Charles is in mourning for his mother. And yet these procedures, this process happens, doesn't it? This is just part of the process that we go through at this time when, presumably for him, he is in mourning. James, I'm not sure if you could hear me there. Just nod if you can hear us. I'm not sure if we've lost our link to you. I'm so sorry. We seem to have lost our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale. Just reporting, just for your information, just to go through the time frame this morning. It's just after 8 o'clock this morning. So those events at St James's Palace take place at 10 o'clock. Full coverage, of course, on the BBC.
Yeah, that will begin at 9:30. And then, of course, full coverage up to that moment, to that accession and the proclamation and all the procedures that James was outlining there. Time now is 10 minutes past 8. Let's go to Buckingham Palace, where King Charles III received a warm reception, and Joanna Gosling is there for us this morning. Joanna, morning to you. Of course, I'm seeing more people gather behind you. And also, of course, yesterday it was those who live closer to Buckingham Palace that could take the opportunity to pay their respects. Now, many more from around the country will be descending.
Absolutely, Naga. I mean, it is very much a focal point for people who want to come and pay their respects, to perhaps stand in quiet contemplation as they think about the 70 years of service of Her Majesty the Queen. And thousands of people came yesterday, and already here today you can see hundreds of people arriving, and the atmosphere amongst those people is very much one of reflection, one of respect. And when the King arrived yesterday to greet that huge crowd that was here, he seemed to take real comfort actually from the contact that he had with the people, as they showed enormous warmth for him in his first direct contact with the people as King, of course known to everybody in his role as the Prince of Wales, but as he assimilates what his new role means for him, so too do the people in terms of the monarchy as a king now, and their King Charles III and Camilla. Yesterday, she was not seen actually on the pictures as he went along and spoke to members of the crowd. It was seen very much as his moment to directly connect with people. And I was told earlier by the people who were working here through the night that hundreds of thousands of floral tributes were left here yesterday. They've taken actually those tributes that were left here yesterday just a little bit away to Green Park, which is just behind where we're standing, so not far at all, but they've created there a flower garden, and that's where they want people now to leave their floral tributes, because they will keep on coming as the people keep on coming. So let's just take a look at some of the people who felt compelled to come here, and to other places who wanted to bring flowers, who wanted to remember the Queen and pay tribute, and also welcome King Charles III. Graham Satchell has this report.
Look at the streets around Buckingham Palace, heaving with people, many carrying bunches of flowers and handwritten tributes. The queues stretching as far as the eye can see.
It's incredibly emotional, actually. It's like a feeling in your stomach as you're walking around. It means so much to people. Something about being here as well just evokes, so much emotion.
I think she's been absolutely fantastic, really selfless and devoted. So I just felt I really wanted to come and just be part of this, to be like a thank you to her for everything that she's done in those 70 years for this country.
She just had that wonderful ability to be personable to people.
Precious.
Very, very special. Yeah.
Privileged to come.
Privileged to come. Oh, very sorry.
St Paul's Cathedral, and a service of remembrance for Her Majesty the Queen. St Paul's was open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis, so there were more queues, almost 2,000 people waiting in line to pay tribute.
The Queen has been an incredible leader and has endured so much, and what she took on from such a young age, so soon after losing her father, is so inspiring. No matter what your views are on any of this, I think that you can, as a human, be inspired by that and respect that.
What did the Queen mean to you? Constant stability in the country, just that one constant. Like Boris said, she was timeless. And she's the mother of the country.
For a brief moment, the heavens opened. It couldn't have been more British, a queue for the Queen in the rain. For some here, the last 2 days, a reminder of 1965 and the funeral of Winston Churchill.
It's one of my earliest memories, really, standing on the balcony of somebody's office and watching the mile-long cortege go by. So,
feel like we've sort of come full circle?
It kind of feels a bit that way, I think probably the Queen is the most loved Brit since Churchill, and that's why we're all here.
At all the various places in and around London where people have gathered to remember the Queen, the feeling is the same. It is quiet, serious, dignified, and the sentiments expressed are the same. It's a mix of heartfelt respect and a profound sense of loss.
Gosh, they're so beautiful.
Windsor Castle, the place the Queen called home, and again more flowers and quiet contemplation.
If there's been one constant in our lives in Britain, it's been the Queen, and I think it's just her sense of duty was obviously the thing that drove her. So I think she's just an amazing role model for both, younger and older generations.
It feels strange because so many people here. It's quite quiet. It's very quiet, and it's just sort of it's lovely to see sort of everybody coming together to show their respects. Really, I was thinking about it yesterday. She was probably everybody's second mum. She was just there for everybody, really. She's such a nice person.
Back at Buckingham Palace, the new monarch, King Charles, and the start of a transition, not just in the transfer of constitutional power, but also in mood, smiles, and handshakes.
He was very thankful for people coming out, and he just seemed very pleased to be here, and he appreciated people being here.
We are at the end of an era, and as one chapter of history closes, another is opening. Graham Satchell, BBC News.
And that royal standard at full mast over Buckingham Palace, underlining the start of the Carolean era. And you can see in the pictures there is a lot of activity. Here this morning there are people arriving already, many people here, hundreds of people laying flowers and just standing in contemplation, and also lots and lots of barriers are being erected in the surrounding area as the crowds are anticipated to keep coming and to keep growing. People of all ages were here yesterday, and there will of course be people amongst those who are coming who have never known, the majority of us, who have never known anything other than the Queen. There are young children who were here yesterday who will grow up without those memories of the Queen, and they will of course have King Charles III as they move forward. So the King is in mourning. He is grieving in private. He is also very much on public display, because we saw that statement to the nation last night, that address, that very moving address, and that was recorded here at Buckingham Palace yesterday, and we do expect him to arrive back here later for more of those duties that he will be doing. He will be meeting the Prime Minister again for another audience, and also the Archbishop of Canterbury we're expecting. So we will be here throughout the day. For now though, back to you in the studio.
Joanna, thank you. Joanna Gosling there. As Joanna was saying, of course there'll be more coverage throughout the day, but as tributes were laid there at Buckingham Palace, not everyone can get there, of course, or to the various sites in the country. So we're giving you an opportunity to pay us your tributes and reflections and memories of the Queen.
So these will be included in special commemorative coverage.
Special commemorative coverage on the BBC News website. And what you can do is send a short message and any pictures you may wish to share. Maybe you met the Queen. Maybe you saw her on walkabout. There's a special email address that has been set up. It's yourqueen@bbc.co.uk. So yourqueen@bbc.co.uk.
Time is just coming up to 20 minutes past 8. MPs and peers will gather in Parliament today for a rare Saturday session to continue paying tribute to the Queen.
Now, yesterday, King Charles III held his first audience with the Prime Minister and new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
We can speak to our political correspondent, Oni Wells, who's at the Houses of Parliament for us this morning. These are not normal times by any means. It's Saturday morning. MPs will be there. And we've already seen some very moving tributes in the Commons and quite a lot of laughter as stories have been told.
That's right. We did have a full day of tributes yesterday here in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and also that first audience between Liz Truss and King Charles III. These are normally very private conversations, but we got a glimpse inside that first meeting yesterday, and King Charles said that he's got to try and keep things going. Now, for him, some of that starts today as he is officially proclaimed king at a ceremony down the road at St James's Palace. Politics, on the other hand, is somewhat on hold until the 21st of September as this period of national mourning continues. But as you say, behind me, both the Houses of Parliament will sit today for more tributes to the late Queen. Yesterday we saw lots of personal memories shared by MPs across the political spectrum about their experiences meeting the Queen or her visiting their constituencies. This sombre ceremony was also punctuated though by moments of humour, particularly from the former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and Theresa May, sharing some memories of her humour and her warmth that they experienced when they met with her too. So I think we can expect more of those kind of memories and testimonies being shared today in both the Houses of Parliament, but also another audience between Liz Truss and her cabinet and the King later this afternoon today. A symbolic moment really for the governance of the UK as we have a new monarch and a new government in the space of a week meeting together this afternoon.
Ione, thank you very much.
Now, one of the 96 gun salutes which took place yesterday to honour Her Majesty was in Plymouth, and our South West England correspondent Jenny Kumar is there for us. Jenny, it was such an interesting and emotional thing to see yesterday, and where you are, that played such a pivotal role in the Queen's life.
Yes, that's right. It was in the nearby town of Dartmouth where the then Princess Elizabeth first met Prince Philip, who went on to become her husband. And this region has a deep connection with the Queen. The Queen and the royal family have a deep connection with this region. And I'm here today at Plymouth. I'm at the Minster Church of St Andrews, the civic church here. And yesterday a book of condolences was opened, and already hundreds of messages have been left. And people have been coming here to lay floral tribute. Now, Plymouth is a naval city. It's home to the naval dockyard, the largest in Western Europe. The Queen visited many times, including most recently in 2018. And I've been taking a look at how the region has been paying tribute and talking to people about how they're feeling about recent events. A naval city paying tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. 96 rounds were fired from the naval dockyard to mark each year of the late sovereign's life.
As the Royal Yacht Victoria and Albert glides into the mouth of the River Dart, memories must be revived for His Majesty.
Plymouth and Devon have a proud Royal Naval heritage and strong connections with the monarch and her family. As a 13-year-old, Her Majesty visited the Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth with her family. It was the first time she remembered meeting a young cadet called Prince Philip. The rest, as they say, is history. And with the Queen's passing, we witness further historic moments, a period of national mourning, and a new king.
Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother, was an inspiration.
Here at Valley View Care Home in Plymouth, there was much interest in the King's speech.
I thought it was very good indeed.
Good, yeah, convincing.
Very sad. Brings back a lot of memories. I felt very involved with it, like if I was there with him. And I had my hands crossed. And it was so sad I could listen to him talking for hours.
So, you think he did a good job?
I think so, yes. And his mum would be proud of him.
What kind of king do you think he'll make?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? I mean, from what he's saying now, he's going to make a good king, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Her dedication and devotion as sovereign never wavered.
While many here grieve for Her Majesty the Queen, they look forward to the new reign of King Charles III. Well, I'm here with the Reverend James Greer, the Bishop Designate of Plymouth. Reverend, how would you say the death of the Queen has impacted here in the city?
It's been profound. I think everybody was expecting the day would come, but nobody was really prepared for the day. Here at St Andrew's Church yesterday, seeing so many people coming in to write in a book of condolences, and I think for all of us, when death comes, we don't quite know what to do with ourselves. We don't know how to grieve, how to mourn. We don't know how to give expression to what we're feeling. And for some people, the emotions have been overwhelming. Somebody I saw yesterday, 94-year-old gentleman, said, I don't know why I'm so emotional, I keep crying, it doesn't make sense.
No, we've been here for a little bit this morning, and this morning we've been seeing people laying flowers. What can you say to people to console them at this time?
I think two things. One, that there's no right way to grieve. It's important that we do grieve rather than push it down. I think we're very good at suppressing emotions, and it's good to give expression to them. So just seeing the flowers here where people have written something, or the book of condolences in churches across the country where people can just say something of what the Queen meant to them. I think the other thing is the Queen had a phenomenal faith. She was somebody who talked constantly about her faith in God, and she actually said she'd love to see the second coming of Jesus in her lifetime so she could lay her crown before him. So she's someone who had confidence in the face of death that she knew where she's going, to be with the God whom she served, just as she served this country.
And in coming days, what is your role in coming days? Will there be any special services?
There will be. So there'll be moments on Sunday, obviously, for people to pause, to pay their respects, to mourn and to pray. But the real service is going to be the following Sunday, where there's going to be the commemoration service in every church. It'll be the same service across the nation.
Reverend James Greer, thank you for joining us this morning. So that service, one of many events happening to mark the loss of Queen Elizabeth II.
Jenny, thank you very much. Jenny Kumar there for us in Plymouth.
Time now is 8:27. Let's have a look at the weather for Saturday with staff. Time now is exactly 8:30. You're watching BBC Breakfast as we look ahead to the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch.
He's meeting the Accession Council at 10 o'clock this morning at St James's Palace. That event will be televised for the first time. And then a public announcement will be made in the City of London. Similar declarations will follow in Belfast, Cardiff and Edinburgh tomorrow.
Also, more reflections on the life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose body remains in Balmoral today, as full tributes are laid outside Balmoral, Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Sandringham and many other venues across the UK and the Commonwealth.
King Charles made his first formal address as a monarch yesterday. He praised his mother's warmth, humour and sense of duty.
He said her 96 years amounted to a life well lived and promised to follow her example.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And wherever you may live in the United Kingdom, or in the realms and territories across the world, and whatever may be your background or beliefs, I shall endeavour to serve you with loyalty, respect, and love, as I have throughout my life. My life will, of course, change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others. This is also a time of change for my family. I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my Queen Consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much. As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, Tywysog Cymru, the country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas. In a little over a week's time, we will come together as a nation, as a Commonwealth, and indeed a global community, to lay my beloved mother to rest. In our sorrow, let us remember and draw strength from the light of her example. On behalf of all my family, I can only offer the most sincere and heartfelt thanks for your condolences and support. They mean more to me than I can ever possibly express. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
As well as that speech being broadcast yesterday at 6 p.m, crowds who had gathered around Buckingham Palace saw King Charles III and the Queen Consort gather and meet some of the crowds at Buckingham Palace who were paying their respects. Let's just show you what's happening now. We've got the view of Buckingham Palace as the Mall reaches up to it this morning. Many people have been coming from much further afield today to pay their respects.
Yes, our correspondent John Maguire is there with many people, John, and there was that remarkable moment yesterday. People have gone there for their own reasons. They want to reflect a bit or share their experiences. And then there was that moment when the new king arrived and actually went and met some of the people.
Yeah, sometimes some of those walkabouts, Charlie, as we know from previous events, certainly in terms of what the crowd are told, can be relatively spontaneous. So those people who were right at the front were amongst the first people. Well, they were, weren't they? The first people to be able to give their good wishes and obviously offer their condolences to the new king. Interesting, so many different aspects of that speech last night. Powerful, emotional, uplifting, really, hopeful in many respects. But one of the things that he said, of course, towards the end, they're talking about his mother, thank you. And that's a word that I've seen written so many times on cards and letters and things that have been placed on the gates of Buckingham Palace. But what's happening today is people are being asked to put their tributes over in Green Park just behind us to try to keep things under a certain amount of control, because as you can see, there are many, many people here today. A slightly different atmosphere here today, and I think that's because there are lots of families. Obviously the children aren't at school, so many of them who wanted to come with their families have come today. People like the Purnell family, good to see you, good morning, with the 3 children. You jumped on the train this morning. What time did Mum drag you out of bed then?
About 6, half 6.
Okay.
Oh, so tired.
Oh, you're tired now. And why did you want to come? Why did you agree to Mum saying you should come today?
Well, I mean, everyone has loved the Queen for the 70 years that she was Queen. And yeah, everyone has loved her, and it's really emotional that she's passed away now.
Well said, Oscar. Very well said. Mum, Lucy, again, why did you bring the family here today? Why was it important for you to come?
I think this is just such a huge moment for the history of our country, and for the children with the Jubilee earlier this year. They've been learning a lot about the Queen, and I think it's really important that we're here and we mark this occasion.
Yeah, we were saying yesterday, actually, many of us were here for the Jubilee just a couple of moments ago. People saying the same sort of things to me about the Queen, about her life, about her decades of service, but obviously a very different atmosphere. It's quiet. That's the thing that strikes me. So many people that are here today, but a quiet, a solemn atmosphere.
It is, considering the crowds, it's very quiet. You could hear a pin drop here. There's just people going about their business, paying their respects. And I said to the children, they were coming down the road, jumping along, but as soon as we got here, I think everyone felt the atmosphere and the mood and kind of knows the reason why we're here, and I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, Oscar, you've got your brother and your sister here, but then you've done, just show us these. Yeah, look at that. You've done some colouring in, haven't you, and written a message as well. What did you put on your message? Can you remember?
Yes, I've put thank you for your service.
From Rupert, you're Rupert. I'm sorry, yes. Oscar's your brother. I've been calling you Oscar all morning. Thanks very much for not correcting me. Helen, also, good morning to you. Why did you feel it was important to spend some time? You brought some flowers as well to Buckingham Palace today.
I've put them over there, but she's always been there for us. I was only 6 months old when she was crowned, but she's been part of this country. She served us so well, with dignity and grace, and I felt I had to come, just lay flowers to, pay my respects.
It's a very personal decision, isn't it, to come and to spend some time to reflect here?
To reflect, because she served this country well through whatever thing she's gone through. So I just felt I had to be here, So I've always I came to the Jubilee, and during when she's been, tripping the colour, and I've seen her a few times, but I've always felt that, she's part of us, so to do that.
And the Jubilee was a wonderful occasion.
Oh, it was. I was here when I saw the fly past down the Mall. Beautiful, wonderful sight.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lucy, just another quick word about the speech last night. I think you as a family sat down and watched the new King's speech. What were your thoughts?
Well, I was really impressed. I mean, he's got huge shoes to fill, and I think everyone was kind of waiting to hear what he was going to say. And actually, I think from my point of view, he pitched it perfectly. He said that he was going to carry on in the way that she'd been leading our country. And it was also really touching as well at the end when he talked about his mummy and her passing. I just thought it was a really emotional speech, and it kind of gives me hope that we are going to be okay. He's going to be a great king, I hope.
All right, good stuff. Thanks very much. Really good to see all of you. Thank you, Rupert, and to little Grace, to Oscar as well. Very nice to see you here at Buckingham Palace this morning to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your day. As we've been saying, people are asked to put those tributes now over in Green Park, such as the size, really, of the response. Perhaps not surprising. There are flowers everywhere you look. All of the parks that surround Buckingham Palace, at the bases, all of the trees, there are bunches of flowers, bouquets of flowers. And the other thing I've noticed is that they all have a note on them, a very personal note to pay tribute to Her Majesty. Some very simple. One I saw yesterday said, "Forever our Queen." Others go into far more detail, far more heartfelt, far more personal. People really wanting to get those emotions across, to get those opinions across. But ultimately, as I say, for them to say thank you to the Queen for her years of service. Buckingham Palace, the balcony above us, one of the most famous buildings in the world, of course. The crowds will stay here, I'm sure, for days to come. Everybody coming, as we've been saying, with their own reasons, but all wanting to pay tribute, to be here for a moment of history. Back to you.
John, it's really interesting. If we stay with you for just a moment, I know you've had the chance to speak to multi-generational families. There was the young lad you spoke to earlier on. I think they'd come down from Leeds, hadn't they, overnight on the coach. It's really interesting. People suddenly, not necessarily knowing in advance, they've just sort of gone, do you know what? I want to be somewhere. I want to be in on what's happening there.
Yeah, and I think people will have seen television images over the last couple of days, and as you say, thought, I'd like to go there. Yesterday, the crowd was very much people who were Londoners, who were local, obviously because it was a work day, travelling to and from work, but today we are seeing families who are travelling from further afield, people who've made that decision. Lucy actually was telling me that on the train this morning they came in from Essex, there were 5 or 6 other families, they just decided they wanted to be here for their own reasons, primarily, as I say, to pay tribute, to pay their respects, but to have a moment, I think, to remember for the young children children as they go forward with a king in their lives. Many of us have only known a queen as the monarch, but they will know King Charles for a good deal of their lifetime, hopefully for a very long time, and hopefully we'll also remember today as being a special day in that transition.
John, thank you very much.
Time now is 18 minutes to 9. Now, most football matches across the UK have been cancelled as a mark of respect to the Queen.
Rugby union, Test cricket and the Golf PGA Championship are all taking place today, while some horse racing returns tomorrow.
Players and officials from a wide range of sports have been paying tribute to Her Majesty, as Joe Wilson reports.
Today, some sport will pause. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, football has decided to stop. Horse racing, the Queen's great passion, will also be postponed in Britain. Other sports continue with expressions of regret and respect. This was the scene during practice at the Italian Grand Prix. We'll see similar at the cricket test match at the Oval. And sport will remember.
Her Majesty the Queen.
The Queen was there to acknowledge and elevate some of the proudest moments in sport. Bobby Moore at Wembley in 1966, Virginia Wade at Wimbledon in 1977. The Queen was a constant as the winners changed. Here, Ian Evans receives the Five Nations Rugby Union Trophy for Wales. Uniquely, the Queen officially opened 2 Olympic Games, 1976 in Montreal, where her daughter Princess Anne competed for Great Britain in the equestrian team, and London 2012.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Her James Bond-themed skydiving arrival was a triumph of choreography and humour, as well as dignity. So close with the Queen's sporting associations, it's no surprise that her death has prompted so many sporting reactions.
I feel like I have to go down to the funeral because I feel like we owe it to her. We are so lucky that the pair of us have been knighted, and just to have that honour feels so incredibly special. And for me now it does, I feel like now we have to give back to her, and I feel like we need to go and say our goodbyes.
On social media, Sir Mo Farah described meeting the Queen as one of the great honours of his life, while David Beckham wrote that until her last days she served her country with dignity and grace.
A royal win in the Gold Cup!
And we remember how sport, specifically horse racing, brought the Queen joy. When her horse won the Gold Cup at Ascot, it was a moment of celebration which we could all connect with. And racing now halts until Sunday.
I've been told by people close to her that the Racing Post would be the first thing that she would read in the morning at breakfast, and that she would be regularly in touch with her trainers and her bloodstock agents, and going to the Royal Stud at Sandringham was one of the great pleasures in life. So we were so lucky as a sport to have her as a supporter, and to have her knowledge as well.
Sporting life is public life. It can unite and inspire people like little else. Through the decades of her reign, the Queen understood this. She was at the heart of it. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
When the Queen was just 4, her father, King George, gave her pony. Now, that gift sparked a love of horses and horse racing, which never dimmed.
Yes, we can speak to Claire Balding, who, of course, over many, many years. Good morning to you, Claire. I know you've met the Queen many, many times. You're at Buckingham Palace this morning. And I'm just trying my first thought is, lots of people have talked about her smile, that smile that can light up a room. And I'm thinking to myself, probably when she was at the races and you've been alongside her at various places, the smile was never probably greater than it was on those kind of occasions.
And do you know what, Charlie, I think even more than that, actually being able to be in the stables, whether it was in the morning or the evening, watching the horses on the gallops, meeting the grooms who worked with them every day, and she had an amazing ability to remember not just characteristics of her horses and generations that she had bred, and if something did something naughty, she'd say, oh, the grandmother was just like that, but also I think all of those who looked after her horses, she would know them by name. If anything happened that was difficult or bad news was there to impart, her first thought was always for those looking after them. You see her there galloping on her. She loved her fell ponies, her Highland ponies as well, was very supportive of the native breeds and loved working horses. Burmese there, the horse that she rode for many years at Trooping the Colour, and riding side saddle, which is not an easy thing to do. The Queen was a very calm person, and I think that's why horses responded so well to her. You know, she was very gentle but certain in the movements that she made. That you could hear her actually talking to horses and just the interest in them. She had cameras in those foaling boxes at Sandringham. There were cameras in the boxes so that she could see foals being born through onto her iPad, or indeed, if the timing worked out, to go and see them in person. The Princess Royal riding with her there, obviously a very, very capable event rider herself. And Terry Pendry, who is the head groom at Windsor, great personal friend of the Queen's, very often the sole companion when she was out riding. And I wonder as well, apart from the beauty of horses and her love of them as animals, there is also the sense that if she was at the races, the Queen was part of a crowd watching something else. She could be a spectator, she could share the experience. It wasn't everyone looking at her. She was an observer, not the one being observed. And the great unpredictability of racing, it doesn't always go right, which is why when you saw her joy with Estimate winning the Gold Cup at Royal Ascot in 2013, that's so genuine and it's so unusual, because it doesn't. I mean, that was a really close fought, hard won race, and Ryan Moore did a terrific job of making sure that the mare could win. But it doesn't happen like that. You know, scripts aren't written. You don't go, oh yeah, here comes the Queen's horse, we'll all just pull up and let her win. And I think she loved that as well. It's genuine competition.
Claire, we've got that clip that you're commentating over it. I know you're a guest, you're not here to work, but can you just do it in your way? Introduce that clip and just set it up for us so we can see it.
Estimate, trained by Sir Michael Stout, ridden by Ryan Moore, coming into the final furlong of the most prestigious race at Royal Ascot, the Gold Cup in 2013. And she has become the first filly since 1991 to win the Gold Cup. And this, the reaction of Her Majesty the Queen, and John Warren going berserk beside her, and the Queen very, very calm, looking up thinking, is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? She's going to. And the Queen is watching her filly Estimate win the race for which she is meant to present the trophy. Her Majesty the Queen only presents 2 trophies during Royal Ascot, and look at the delight there, the sheer joy. Magnificent scenes, the crowd seeing that as well on the big screen and responding with laughter and with applause.
Claire, that must have been such a lovely moment. I mean, you think, of course, people want to know what's going on with the race as well, but people love moments like that. They never see them. They never see her. So kind of free, I suppose.
Exactly, and that's it. It's that sense of just being able to let yourself go a bit. And I think if you're the Queen, that's pretty hard to do, to be honest. And you know, life is very often about duty and formality, and people obviously would be nervous in the presence of the Queen, but in racing yards, and I think at the races, again, because there's something else to talk about and to focus on, everybody's having a conversation, and the Queen is part of the conversation. And I mentioned how knowledgeable she was, not just of the breeding and the form of her horses and the types of races. I mean, Royal Ascot mattered a lot to her because it is the monarch's racecourse. It was founded in 1711 by Queen Anne. King Charles now is the owner of Ascot Racecourse. The Queen would always make sure that where possible, and until COVID came, that she was there for what was originally 4 days and then became 5 days of the royal meeting, to lead the royal procession, always dressed in brightly coloured clothes so she could be seen, but loving to actually look at the horses. She wanted to stay in the paddock when the royal procession arrived there because she wanted to see the runners for the first race. And the same would always happen at Epsom. You know, she was a regular attendee at the Derby. She loved the history of the Derby. It was the one classic in this country that actually, as an owner, she never won. She was second, she was third. But she loved seeing those horses who had been bred for that one chance, because you only get one chance of running in the Derby, and she wanted to see them in the paddock beforehand. She wanted to discuss them. And I remember once being in the royal box at Ascot, and it was sort of tea time, and I'd been working earlier in the day, so I'd gone up there, I'd been asked up there, and we were watching the 5th race. And she said, look at him, look at Hughesy, Richard Hughes this is, who used to ride a lot for her. She said, look at Hughesy at the back there with his bottom in the air. And the thing is, you've no idea whether he's actually got anything left or not, because he always used to ride in this way that made him look as if he was travelling really well. She called the jockeys by their nicknames. She wanted to know what was going on in people's lives. You'd always see her laughing. Willie Carson, who I worked with for many years, is a great friend, rode for the Queen, was her retained jockey. And he was always laughing with her. Frankie Dettori, the same thing. Ryan Moore is a different character. He would be much quieter, more respectful. But even he would be made to smile in a way. It's something the Queen would say. But she genuinely loved it. She loved being immersed in that world. And I think had she, and she has said this before, had she had an opportunity to, in a parallel world, have a different lifestyle, I think it certainly would have been involved very, very closely with horses and most probably with racehorses, the thoroughbred, the finest athlete of the equine world.
Claire, it's lovely hearing people talk about their moments when they met the Queen, and you obviously, you did a few times because your father Ian, your brother Andrew, both trained the Queen's horses. Can you tell me, because of that, the Queen would come once a year to look at the horses. Can you tell me why sausages are more important than curtsying to the Queen?
Unfortunately, do you know, I feel so much better since Theresa May told that story about the cheese yesterday.
Yes.
Because I had a similar incident with a sausage at the breakfast table and trying to cut it to put it on toast, and it shooting across the table, and the Queen was sitting at the end of the table, and she did just do, and I grabbed the sausage, put it back on the toast, and she just raised an eyebrow, and I thought, okay, we'll be all right here. But yeah, the informality of it, and actually Richard Hannon, who trained for her for many years, said that she loved coming to stables because it was the one place that didn't smell of fresh paint. You know, it smelt of horses, it smelt of, life carries on, and I think that's why, racing obviously wants to pay respect, but also understands that the wheel must keep turning, things must keep going, and racing will resume tomorrow, the St Leger being the major race at Doncaster, a race that the Queen herself won with a brilliant filly called Dunfermline. And I think that will be an opportunity for racing folk to gather together. There was the most wonderful scene at Epsom this year on Derby Day when unfortunately the Queen couldn't come. She wanted to. It was going to kick off the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. But there was a line of about 20 jockeys who'd all ridden for the Queen, all wearing her colours. And that I think is such a powerful way in which racing very quietly but in a very heartfelt way can say thank you for everything you did for racing, for everything that you invested in it in terms of time and commitment and knowledge. But also we understand how much you loved it, and we want to show our love back.
Claire, if there was something else that I think in people's minds is synonymous with the Queen, it's her corgis. And I've heard some quite funny anecdotes already from politicians and people who sort of found themselves on their own in a room with the corgis when the Queen is about to arrive or has maybe left the room. She was a dog lover as well.
Yeah, the Pembroke Welsh Corgi is notoriously naughty. And it just amuses me greatly that this is the dog of choice, and the corgis have been part of the Queen's life for so many years. But that scene that you showed earlier with Daniel Craig, when she gets up from the desk and the Queen goes to walk with him, the corgis lead the way. Now that genuinely would happen. I was very lucky to be at lunch at Windsor Castle, and as we moved from pre-lunch drinks towards the dining room, the corgis led the way. I said, does that always happen? The Queen said, oh yes, they know where they're going and they know what time it is.
I suppose the joy of that, Claire, and you tell these stories so well and so fondly, is it's a leveller, isn't it? I mean, that's the impression I'm getting from you, that the animals, in amongst the extraordinary world that she inhabited, they were a kind of a leveller.
Totally, and I think also they reflect you honestly. They don't know your status. They're not going to bow or curtsy. The naughty ones will be naughty, and you will try and, encourage them to behave a little better. But it's like, the Queen was very, very good with children. When my nephew Jono first met her when he was about 5 or 6, and she'd come to Kingsclear to see the horses, and he'd been building up, and his parents had very much taught him how to bow and behave and all of those things. And he just looked at her when he first met her and said, "But I don't understand. Where's your crown?" And she said, "Oh, I don't wear it all the time." But the humour, she loved things that loved stories about things that had gone slightly wrong, And I think, you know, in a world where so much is, everyone's trying to make things perfect, actually, the Queen genuinely understood that the world isn't like that. It doesn't all go like clockwork, and she quite enjoyed the little mistakes that might be made, or indeed the behavioural quirks that certainly animals will always have.
Claire, it's been lovely talking to you this morning. Thank you so much for sharing those stories with us.
Just coming up to 9 o'clock. Let's see how the weather's looking. Stav has the forecast for us.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Majesty and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Love, loyalty and duty. King Charles thanks his mother for her unwavering service and makes a solemn vow in his first address as monarch.
As the Queen herself did with such unswerving devotion, I too now solemnly pledge myself, throughout the remaining time God grants me, to uphold the constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you.
In 1 hour at St James's Palace, Charles III will be formally proclaimed king, an historic ceremony that will be televised for the first time.
At Buckingham Palace, tributes continue to pour in for the Queen as people reflect on her reign.
Feels personal, feels like part of my family, so I just wanted to come and do the right thing.
Good morning. It's Saturday, the 10th of September. In 1 hour, an official ceremony will begin to formally proclaim King Charles III as monarch.
It will take place at St James's Palace in London, and for the first time in history, that moment will be televised.
We're going to bring you more reflections from those who knew Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who died on Thursday afternoon, and of course the latest scenes from Buckingham Palace, where large crowds are expected to gather.
First, though, our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph reports on King Charles's first full day as a monarch and that emotional tribute to the Queen.
His first public appearance as king. Before official duty, he met the people at Buckingham Palace. The cameras stayed close. There was an informality, even a kiss from a well-wisher, amidst the condolences and chat. Then a poignant image. King Charles III and Camilla Queen Consort walked into the palace from where his mother had reigned for 7 decades, and from where he will now serve, all ahead of the King's first address to the nation.
Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. That promise of lifelong service I renew to you all today. My life will of course change as I take up my new responsibilities. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply. But I know this important work will go on in the trusted hands of others.
He thanked his wife and both his sons, making William and Catherine Prince and Princess of Wales.
With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground, where vital help can be given. I want also to express my love for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas.
He ended with a moving, personal tribute.
And to my darling Mama, as you begin your last great journey to join my dear late Papa, I want simply to say this: thank you. Thank you for your love and devotion to our family and to the family of nations you have served so diligently all these years. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
A service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral saw senior politicians and members of the public reflect on a long reign. It ended with the national anthem. Now they sang God Save the King. And in a special BBC tribute programme last night, the Queen's children spoke personally about their mother.
It was a very special relationship, and apart from my three brothers, we're the only people who have that relationship, so that's how I remember her.
Today at St James's Palace, the new king will be officially proclaimed when the ceremonial body, the Accession Council, meets, a moment that will be televised for the first time. We're now in a period of time where the country is both mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, alongside welcoming the reign of King Charles III. It is a mix of emotion and formality, an adjustment for everyone. Over the weekend, we will get more details about plans for the coming days, including the date of the state funeral, when the royal family will lead the country's farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
So that formal proclamation ceremony in which Charles III is formally announced as the new king will take place at St James's Palace at 10 o'clock this morning.
Now, our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, is at the palace. And if anyone knows, James, it is you about what we're going to see. It's the first time it's going to be televised. And for most of us in the UK, apart from those of a certain generation, they will have no idea what is involved.
Yeah, that's true. We've never seen this before. It's never been exposed to the public eye. It happens, as we say, rarely. It's simply a sort of ceremonial formality, or the niceties that have to happen after a new monarch becomes a monarch. That's automatic. When the old monarch dies, the new monarch takes over automatically. This is the moment when all the country's most senior politicians and officials and some diplomats and some judges, I've just seen them all starting to arrive. The Prime Minister's just arrived with the Cabinet Secretary. There have been some politicians from the past, people like Nick Clegg, the former Deputy Prime Minister I've just seen, Lord Mandelson. Basically, the cream of the great and the good, of the establishment, are here to hear the formal declaration and oaths and proclamations and all those kind of things that have to happen after a new monarch accedes to the throne. So they're going to be meeting in that building behind me very shortly. There'll be various procedures, orders in council, technical things like that to allow for the continuity of government. And then once they've had a meeting with the king, he will make his own oaths and various other procedural matters. There will be a formal declaration from that balcony by somebody called Garter, King of Arms. He's a chap who wears a very large haberd here, the colourful top, and he will formally declare not just that the Queen is dead, but also the identity of the new king. In times past, when we didn't have social media, that mattered, because this was the formal moment when the identity of the new monarch was confirmed to the people, and that's why this proclamation will then be repeated in the City of London and around the nations in coming hours.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. Thank you for painting that picture, James. From the costumes to the pomp and the ceremony. And of course, we will be bringing you that live on BBC One from 10 o'clock, from 9:30, in fact, where we will lead up to that event.
So those events at St James's Palace. But I think if we go to the shot of Buckingham Palace now, St James's Palace, as we look at it here, is off to the right in the foreground. We look down the Mall, Buckingham Palace in front of us, and Joanna Gosling is there for us this morning. Good morning to you, Joanna. So, as James was explaining, this is a formal day, isn't it? There are formal procedures, but where you are is very much about people who've turned up for whatever reason to spend a bit of time, to maybe chat with others and celebrate or commiserate with the royal family, send their condolences, lay flowers.
It is absolutely that, Charlie. This is where the people are paying tribute, and they have been coming in their thousands and bringing flowers in their thousands, hundreds of thousands, I was told, from the people who have been here since yesterday and overnight, hundreds of thousands of bouquets Candles were lit overnight, teddies were left, there are photographs that people have left of moments when they met Her Majesty the Queen. It's thought around 1 in 3 people in this country have met or seen the Queen, and that is very much what is driving so many to want to come here and pay their respects. And we see here pictures from yesterday when those floral tributes were being laid at the gates of Buckingham Palace. Actually, overnight, they've all been moved because what has been established is a flower garden in Green Park, which is right next to the palace here. And I just walked around and had a look at that flower garden, and it's incredibly moving actually to be there. You can see those clusters of flowers, and they are fast growing. And as you walk there, around all of the trees, there are flowers. People are walking along in quiet contemplation mostly, actually. There's very little chatter. It's not somber. It feels respectful. It feels like that moment when people just want to connect with this moment of history and to reflect back, to say thank you. That's the word. Those are the words that you see again and again on those floral tributes. Simply thank you, echoing what King Charles III said in his address to the nation last night, when he said, amongst all of those beautiful thoughts that he shared of his mother, he said quite simply he wanted to say thank you, and this is where people can come and do that. The King will be back here a little bit later on for more of those formal duties. For now, back to the studio.
Joanna, thank you.
So that's the view of Buckingham Palace this morning. The sun is shining over the palace, and crowds will be grateful. More and more people gathering from around the UK, making that special journey to pay their tributes. And John Maguire, yesterday and today, has been talking to people about why it's important for them to pay their respects. And John, we've just heard from so many different generations, young to older generations, and just what the Queen meant to them and what the incoming monarch, well, the monarch now, Prince Charles III, what their hopes for him.
Yeah, no one will really know exactly what's going to happen in the weeks, months ahead. We can only imagine, and certainly the people that I've spoken to were emboldened, were very impressed by the King's speech last night, feeling as if he will, as he promised to do, take over the reins. She has big shoes to fill, somebody said to us earlier, didn't they? He has big shoes to fill, somebody said to us earlier, didn't they? We'll have to see how he shapes up to the top job in Buckingham Palace, but certainly a lot of confidence in his role. So many people gathered here today. Slight change in that people are no longer being allowed to lay flowers at the gates of Buckingham Palace. They're being asked to take them over to Green Park just behind us, but the crowds really are building. Lots and lots of families here today, which is wonderful to see. Picking up on that point you made, Naga, about it being a multi-generational experience. So many people, in fact, that there is a bit of crowd control going on, trying to sort of filter people through to keep people moving, but still allowing people to have that moment for themselves, that moment of reflection, standing in front of Buckingham Palace, perhaps looking up at the balcony, remembering that famous balcony. And so many times we've seen it on so many huge royal occasions in the past. Let's talk to a few folks here now, to Stephen, to Jordan and to Sarah. Sarah, lucky enough to have met the Queen.
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
So I must have been about 3 or 4.
Okay.
Was with my late grandparents, and she came to my hometown of Macclesfield. I just remember being really excited and was like, oh my goodness, like I'm stood in front of the Queen waving my little flag. It was really special.
You might not remember what she said, but presumably others have remembered, have they? Do you remember your what you were told about the conversation?
It was very brief. It was, absolutely packed. But she was just like, oh, thank you for coming, nice to meet you, and then she moved on to the next person. But it was really lovely.
And you got photos to remember it by, I hope?
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff. Jordan, why is it important for you to be here today?
Just to show respect, really. She was a great person, and Charles has lost his mum.
Yes.
So I lost my mum, so I know how he feels. And yeah, it's just nice to pay a visit and stuff. So yeah.
And sometimes it's important to remember that, isn't it? To strip back all of the constitutional and the royal aspects of his speech last night. But ultimately, he was talking about his mother, who he'd lost just a couple of days before.
Yeah, it was. It was a good speech.
He did very well. I mean, he was visibly emotional, but I thought he did incredibly well considering it'd been like 24 hours since he'd lost his mum.
Yeah, extraordinary. Stephen, you will detect from Stephen's accent a former South African. You now live in this country. So tell us about your memories from a South African perspective of the Queen.
Well, when I was growing up, we were always told about the royal visit of 1947, when my grandfather, who was German, unbelievably took the family down to watch the royal procession go down Adderley Street. And our family are royalists. Even in South Africa, the Queen was a constant presence. And I'm here today because you feel a sense of loss. It's extraordinary. We never met Her Majesty, but her passing is a milestone in history, really, and just one feels a personal connection with Her Majesty, and with her family. And I think King Charles is going to make a brilliant king. He gave a fantastic speech yesterday, and I was so impressed that he got out of his state limousine and actually spoke to the crowds rather than just drive into the palace. That speaks volumes about who King Charles is. And it's just a privilege to be in London today. It really is a privilege to be outside Buckingham Palace. And yes.
And have you felt surprised by perhaps your reaction to the recent last couple of days? You talk about that personal connection.
Yes, I have. And it's interesting, in the office yesterday, people who I wouldn't have thought were royalists have said the same thing, how extraordinary it is that Her Majesty's passing has evoked such an emotional response. She was truly, I think, a universal figure and beloved by many people that you wouldn't expect to have loved her as much as they do.
Yeah, all right. Very well said, folks. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Amazing to hear those personal viewpoints, and also to hear some themes repeated time and time again, really. That connection, that personal connection, and that's what's compelling people to come here. Who've been here yesterday and who are here again today, that sense that they just want to be here to mark a moment in history, to mark the passing of the crown from Elizabeth to Charles, if you like, but I think more particularly to pay tribute, to pay their respects, offer their condolences to the family, but also pay their respects to the Queen for her 7 decades of service. And as you've heard, people with very personal connections to her, whether, like Sarah, they were lucky to meet her or perhaps not. Back to you.
John, thanks very much. And that's the view of Buckingham Palace this morning as you look up the Mall, a view many of us are very familiar with, and no doubt more crowds will be gathering throughout the day. It's going to be a busy day today because just in about 45 minutes begins the whole process of the proclamation of King Charles III and his accession.
Inevitably, a lot of the focus has been on events in London. Of course, that will maintain throughout the next 7 to 10 days around those formal events. But you'll be aware by now, many cities around the UK and elsewhere, there are things going on, different ways of marking the death of the Queen. Jamie Cummin has been looking at how York has been marking the moment.
In York, everything looked the same.
It's not been a normal day today.
But everything felt different.
I just think she has been stable in an unstable world, and it gets more unstable by the week.
Yeah, I was saying with my friend at lunch, like, it just feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't think it's sunk in yet, to be quite honest with you.
No, I don't think it has.
It's just been a bit surreal, really. You know, she's somebody that's been there my entire life. And it just seems very odd that she isn't anymore, I suppose.
Bells rang out, not just here in York, but also in Dartmouth, in Norwich, in Bolton.
And the bells have been ringing a lot during the day, all over the city. And everybody's upset. Just burst into tears, really. So we're crying in our wine. But it really, really upsetting, really. We were really tearful.
You have had to cry?
Yeah, I don't mind. And I will have more cries until it's all over.
Almost 3,000 people came to York Minster to give thanks yesterday.
That's right, yes, just to express the sympathy and the feelings of how beautiful and what a lovely person the Queen was and what she meant to us.
There will be a day when Isabella probably asks you about the Queen.
Yeah, probably learns about her in school.
Yeah. What will you tell her?
Oh, goodness.
I think just that she's been a big part of everybody's life.
She's like the nation's grandmother.
Yeah, I think so.
There is grief, but gratitude too.
I think she was a pretty special person. I really do. So sad she's gone. And 2 days ago, she was still working and sworn in a new Prime Minister. I mean, really?
You just think she was an awesome woman.
Oh, she was. She was fabulous.
There were gun salutes here in York. Also in Belfast. In Edinburgh. In Cardiff. And in London. And as the day started to close across the country, people gathered to hear their new king address the nation.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow.
I feel positive, but it feels really strange to say the king, God save the king, and it just feels weird. All my life I've said God save the Queen and not even thought about it.
The fact that everybody's welcomed Charles today, shaking his hands and talking to him.
For the more than 70 years in which my mother...
But actually the mama and papa bit at the end was very and it does make you think he's just lost his mum yesterday.
Yeah, the new king, so big boots to fill, but yeah.
This was a broadcast which marks the end of an era, a new chapter in the life of the monarchy and in the hearts of the nation.
Long live the king!
Long live the king!
21 minutes past 9. Now, among the first wave of people who went to Buckingham Palace on Thursday was the composer and theatre impresario Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber.
He met Her Majesty many times, including when she knighted him. That was in 1982. And we can speak to Andrew Lloyd Webber now from his home in Berkshire. Very good morning to you, Andrew. First of all, I know that you decided for yourself to go on Thursday to Buckingham Palace. Just tell us about that moment and why, like so many people we've heard from this morning, it felt like the right thing to do.
Well, it was only a few weeks before that I was standing on a stage outside the railings of Buckingham Palace for the Jubilee concert. And having had the luck and privilege and joy of knowing Her Majesty a little over the last, 20, 30 years, a little more maybe, I thought it was the least I could do. I was, ironically, on my way to Her Majesty's Theatre, which will now be, of course, His Majesty's Theatre. But I diverted, and we went, and my wife and I and our daughter all met outside the gates. And I just thought it was absolutely the right thing to do. She was the most extraordinary person, and we will never see the like again.
It's interesting, Andrea. So many people, and we've spoken to many of them this morning, some people say they don't really quite know why they're feeling so emotional at this time. It's to do with continuity, to do with what they represented to her. What about you over the course of your life? And I know you've known her, if you like, professionally because of the work you've done. But what did she mean to you?
Well, I think, as was just being said just a few moments ago, one of the things she represents to our generation is stability. To the many generations now before. But she just represented a force for the good as well, which was really, really extraordinary. I mean, we all know how passionately she believed in the Commonwealth, and I think that speaks volumes about what she really represented to people right over the world.
You know, she had a love of the arts. I mean, we've spoken about the love she had for horse racing, but a love of the arts as well. And you managed to combine the two when she actually visited you at your home to hear some music. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes, I wrote a song with Gary Barlow for the Jubilee a few years ago called Sing. And she was in the Newbury area where I live. One of her great joys was going to Newbury Racecourse, where I have met her several times, and it's wonderful to see her off duty with the passion that she had for her horses and her racing. But anyway, it was arranged that she would come round and hear the song with Gary and myself, and a choir we put together of, shall we say, equestrian people. They were racing trainers and jockeys, and it was great fun. We had a lovely evening, and we also played a couple of songs from the Rodgers and Hammerstein era, and because she loved the musicals which were around, I guess, when she was in her teens. And so we had a few of those, and it was a magic evening.
One of the things that so many people have said who have spent time in the Queen's company is her ability to adapt to any situation and to make people feel comfortable in her presence. Was that the same for you?
Well, absolutely. And I sort of saw it at first hand, particularly sometimes when she went racing and perhaps somebody would come and sit next to her she just had this extraordinary way of putting people at ease and making people really feel that they could ask, things. They could just, and particularly when I was lucky enough to see her off duty, she was so warm and so wonderful. She came round once to our house, and do you know what the children did? It was so naughty of them, and they were old enough to know better, but they put football shirts. One, they support Southampton, and the other one supports Chelsea, and they put these football shirts outside the windows as she was coming past, and the Queen just said to me, do you normally put your washing outside the window? and it's just sort of, just the warmth and she was so extraordinary. I can't really put it into words. I'm just so lucky to have met her very few times.
Andrew, I'm sure on occasions when she's visited your theatres, I know sometimes the Queen would walk down and meet stars, very big stars who'd be in shows. How would that be? That relationship between her and people, very important, famous people from the world of show business?
Well, what was always the case was that she was incredibly well briefed, so that she knew what people had done and was able to ask questions, about the work that they'd been engaged in or what they'd done in the past. And that just showed how much she cared. If you really think about her work ethic, absolutely remarkable. I couldn't even begin to remember what she remembered when she was meeting so many people.
Well, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, it's been a delight to speak to you this morning. And it's so interesting that you, like so many people, have decided that you wanted to make your mark and lay your flowers at Buckingham Palace. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We'll just show you Buckingham Palace at the moment. The sun is shining over the palace now, as we can show you the view up the Mall, where crowds have been gathering in the last hours and, of course, obviously the last couple of days to pay their respects.
Very much the focal point, of course, Buckingham Palace. But today is a slightly different day from yesterday because there are formal procedures taking place. In half an hour, the ceremony for the formal proclamation of King Charles III as monarch will begin.
And it will take place at St James's Palace in London. Live coverage of that event, it's never been televised before, is going to continue on BBC News.
So we will bring you the formal proclamation this morning that will actually begin at 10 a.m. this morning. Regular updates, of course, from Buckingham Palace, where those crowds have been gathering.
And the flags have been raised to full mast, you will notice, for that proclamation ceremony. Afterwards, they will be returned to half mast as the national period of mourning continues. Of course, coverage will continue here on BBC One.